Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Thousand Oaks City Council meeting for Tuesday, July 19th, 2011. If you'd all please rise and join me in pledging allegiance to our flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, Ms. Lawrence. Could you call the roll for tonight's meeting, please?
Councilmember Gillette is absent this evening. Councilmember Bill De La Pena.
Present.
Councilmember Glancy.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Irwin.
Here.
Mayor Fox.
Here. Item 4 is request for continuance of any public hearing or agenda item. There is none noted on the agenda. Do we have any specials by the council? Or hearing none, we'll move to item 5. That's special presentations. Tonight we have one special presentation, and I'd like to have John Short please come to the podium. As John gets up, on June the 28th, the council was very pleased to announce that it reached an agreement between the City of Thousand Oaks, the Thousand Oaks Library Foundation, Cal Lutheran University, and the Conejo Recreation and Park District to acquire the Ed Lawrence Conejo Valley Photographic Collection. For those of you that are not aware, Mr. Lawrence has chronicled our city from the very beginning with truly inspiring pictures of days of old with sheep walking down Thousand Oaks Boulevard and pictures of many, many sites in Thousand Oaks that were surrounded by virtually nothing. And so John was one of the key people in making this transaction happen, and he's with us here this evening to tell us about the upcoming showing of the Ed Lawrence photos. John, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Fox, council members, staff. As Mayor Fox had so eloquently mentioned, this acquisition was made several weeks ago, and this Saturday, July 23rd, from 12 to 5 o'clock at Cal Lutheran University, there is going to be the slide presentation, one starting at 1 o'clock and one starting at 3 o'clock. But Mr. Lawrence will be available prior to the first showing and after the second showing to answer any questions, and it's entitled Ranches to Residents, and it's basically a catalog of all of his black and white photos and color photos over the last 50 years. And so it's open to the public, and we'd love to have you folks come out this Saturday from 12 to 5 o'clock, and the showings are at 1 and 3 p.m. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, John. Good job. We'll move to item 7. That's the City and Redevelopment Agency consent calendar. Any items council would like called special? Ms. Irwin.
7N, please.
7N, like a Nancy. Ms. Bill of Opinion, any items?
Item V, please.
7V, like in Victor. Okay, those we call special. Need a motion to approve the balance of the consent calendar. Dr. Clancy.
Mr. Mayor, with the exception of 7N and 7V, I move the consent calendar.
All right, Dr. Clancy moves. Item 7, discussion. Vote, please.
And Mayor, we actually have 2 speaker cards for consent also.
We do. And they are 7T and 7. All right, so let's hold off on the vote, and we'll have our speaker cards. Janet Fleming, questions only for 7T. There are no questions on that item. And Nick Kidwai. Skipped it. Okay.
Begin in the name of God, who is most beneficial, most merciful, Nick Iqbal Kidwai, resident of Newberry Park, Director Concerned Citizen of Thousand Oaks. Honorable Mayor, Council. I don't know if you skipped through public comments, but I do have a card on that too.
I do, Mr. Kidwai. I'm going to go back to public comments as soon as we
I guess we are in a hurry to start the summer hiatus. I want to again reiterate on C and C appointments that you really need to open up the committee process and not limit people to be on just one committee. even though it seems like a lot of people are not applying to committees. It's more fun to watch the rascals on TV debate the debt limit, etc., than to come out here and get, skewered by the mayor and other people sitting on the high dais. It's interesting that you have our wonderful Dr. Glancy going to the league meeting in September, but the city where this wonderful conference is going to be held is not mentioned. I mean, these are the kind of little things that make a difference, because some people think that these are junkets. I don't, but some people do think that. And so if it's in Hawaii or something like that, I think it's in Sacramento. It's good to have presentation that gives the time to read the consent calendar again. This Wendy Drive interchange approved expenditure $459,000 out of a budget of about 1.7. This needs more public discourse. This is a great thing that the city is doing. A lot of concerned citizens have approached me saying that this Lowe's is going to create a traffic hazard and that conditions will get worse. But because most of the people do not know that this, I believe the project is almost $10 million and it's going to really improve the expenditures. You, City Manager Authority for summer recess. I've been opposed for 15 years for this European way of running the city. Before it was that a lot of business was postponed because there was a lot of business that was coming and it could not, it created a scheduling problem. Now it's just the opposite, with the council and the city trying to generate business so as to fill the coffers of the city, so as to maintain the high salaries of some of the individuals. Number R, BMW motorcycles, $127,000 for 10 motorcycles. I mean, only the government can spend money like this.
Thank you, Mr. Gidway. All right, now we'll vote on the consent calendar. Dr. Clancy, you want to restate your motion?
Sure, Mr. Mayor. With the balance of the exception of 7N and 7V, I move the consent calendar.
All right, Dr. Clancy moves. Discussion. Vote, please.
That motion carries 4-0 with Councilmember Gillette absent, and I'll just read the title for W. Ordinance title, ordinance adding or amending Article 5, Chapter 3, Title 4 of the Thousand Oaks Municipal Code relative to speed limits, MCA 2011-70127.
All right, that is approved. We'll now move to the two items called special. Ms. Irwin, item 7N.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mr. Spurgeon. I did call out 7N because I wanted you first to explain in the three different items were broken out, but there was no cost associated with them. So could you explain those three items on the Wendy Drive interchange improvement? And then just for our residents, maybe you could go a little in depth on item number 3, because I think that's really one of the important changes.
Sure, be happy to. You're referring to on page 2 or page 350 of the packet. There's 3 items that this amendment covers. This is an amendment to the consulting services agreement for the design of this project. This project does widen the Wendy Bridge at the 101. It is a very important project, as our public speaker pointed out, and it will help mitigate a lot of the congestion that is there now, and certainly is expected to increase when the Lowe's comes online. But this and other improvements that the developer is making should fully mitigate those traffic impacts. What we're doing is, with this amendment to the design contract, we're changing the stormwater treatment design, and item number 1, which we did include indicate a cost savings for this change of $900,000. It's changing from filters to bioswales. It's something that is required by the state, and Caltrans has a standard method for that. That's what we started with, but our designers looked at a better way to doing it and save some money in the project in the long run. Item 2 is adding some aesthetic design to the bridge structure on the outside of the bridge railing. This will improve how the bridge looks as you're driving in and out of town from the freeway. This is kind of a gateway interchange for us, so staff wanted to include some aesthetic design. Other cities have done that along the freeway. This adds about $200,000 to the cost of the project, but we think that's money well spent for the impact that it'll have. And then the final item is widening the southbound off-ramp. And anybody who uses that interchange knows in the afternoon the traffic backs up well onto the freeway, and that's a real concern. The initial project scope, which had been set some time ago, did not include this scope of work. So we were not going to touch that ramp. As we started design last year, we realized, we cannot do this project and not address this ramp. The other ramps are all being addressed. So this was actually added to the scope of the work back in November. This is some additional changes that Caltrans wanted here for retaining walls and others, but the total cost is $1.8 million. It does add that much to the project. But with all that, the total project now at a little over $15 million is fully funded, and we're excited to move this one forward. We should be under construction sometime early next year.
Thank you, Mr. Spurgeon. I will move 7N.
Okay, Mr. Irwin moves 7N. Discussion on the motion. Vote, please.
Motion carries 4-0.
That is approved. Ms. Bill de la Pena, I have 7V.
Thank you. Item 7V deals with our changed mobile home rent stabilization ordinance. And I did vote, for housekeeping purposes, I did vote against that last Tuesday because Ranch did not want to be covered under this, and I will vote against it again tonight.
All right, noted. Who wants to move for 7V? Dr. Clancy.
Mr. Mayor, I move 7V.
All right. 7V is moved. Discussion? Vote, please.
Motion carries 3-1, and I'll read the ordinance title. An ordinance amending Thousand Oaks Municipal Code, Sections 5-25.02, 5-25.05, and 5-25.06A, 5-25.10, and 5-25.12, and adding Sections 5-25.051.1 and 5-25.05.2 relating to mobile home rent stabilization, and rescinding Resolution Number 84-037, Resolution Number 2011-25, and Rent Adjustment Commission Resolution 09-2011.
All right. Let's move to public comment. Madam Clerk, could you call public comment, please?
This is the time and place for public comments. A speaker card is available for those wishing to address the City Council regarding items on the agenda or on a subject within the city's jurisdiction. All speakers for public hearings shall be called and heard during the public hearing. Pursuant to council standards of operation, the mayor may assist any speaker from straying into areas not within the city's jurisdiction. All remarks should be addressed to the City Council as a whole. Under state law, issues discussed under public comments can have no action unless listed on the agenda and may be referred to the city manager for administrative action or scheduled on a subsequent agenda. All documents for City Council and the official city record should be presented to the city clerk prior to speaking, and speakers are requested to state their name and community of residence for the record. 6 people have presented cards, and pursuant to council standards, speakers are allowed 3 minutes. The yellow light displays when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Ms. Lawrence. Our first speaker is Ken Free, followed by former school board member Dolores DiDio, followed by Vincent DiDio. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mayor and City Councilman. As you know, I'm Ken Free, a resident of the city in the Conejo Oaks neighborhood. I'd like to address the council this evening concerning the recommendations of the Water Rate Structure Committee, about which a staff report has been made to the council and which is on this evening's agenda as item 11C. You'll recall that it's been almost a year now since hundreds of citizens brought to your attention the issue of the disparate and perhaps unintended impact upon older, low-density neighborhoods of the water rate structure changes made by the city in 2009. At that time and since then, many seniors cried out for relief from 65% increases to their already high water bills. You at the council level listened to these concerns and consequently established a volunteer committee representing all water constituencies in the city and gave it the charge to review, evaluate, and make recommendations on this topic. This committee has since met 10 times, and after much work and certainly some angst, has now made its recommendations. We support those recommendations because, while not perfect in all respects, they do seem to have taken our concerns into account, and the resulting rate structure, if enacted, would be fair to all residential water customers of the city. With your help, by approving the committee's recommendations, for most of us, the days of the $800 water bill will be behind us. We do recognize that even with your approval tonight, a mandatory process of notifications and public meetings needs to occur, and that if all goes towards the positive, that the earliest changes in the water rate structure would not occur prior to next January. This will mean that from start to finish, we will have suffered through an unfortunate experiment lasting 2.5 years. For this reason, we encourage you to vote for the committee's recommendation tonight and to direct city staff to proceed with all notifications with full diligence as quickly as the law will allow. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Free. Dolores DiDio, followed by Vincent DiDio, followed by Arya Payan. Good evening, ma'am.
Good
Welcome.
evening, Mayor Fox, council members. As a member of the Conejo Oaks Estates and Conejo Oaks community for almost 50 years, so I'm giving away my age, I really do support the committee's recommendation to have a flat rate, and Mr. Freed really expressed it really well. He's done a lot of work on this, and I really want to publicly thank him for bringing us all together and bringing us that to our attention. And also, I want to thank the committee members for listening to us, older people who live in the area, because it is especially a hardship for people who live on a fixed income. And some of the younger people who come in who have kids, just because it's a bigger lot doesn't mean that you have to pay a lot more. A flat rate would be more equitable and not discriminatory. Whatever water you use, that's what you pay for. And so thank you very much for listening. And also, I would really say thank you to the committee again, and good evening.
Thank you. Vincent DiDio, followed by Arya Payan, followed by Nick Kidwai. Okay, very good. Statement card in favor, I'm assuming. All right, very good. I don't know if I've gotten this name right. A-R-Y-A P-A-Y-A-N. All right. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, council members and staff. Thank you for having me here tonight. My name is Arya Payan, as you said, and I just wanted to come here as a resident of Thousand Oaks and also as a member of the local Baha'i community my entire life. A little bit about the Baha'i community. Baha'i faith it's a world religion that was established in Iran in 1844. And today, there's over 5 million Baha'is worldwide in over 200 territories and countries. Since the inception of the Baha'i faith, Baha'is have faced systematic persecution, resulting in loss of jobs, loss of pensions, properties, inheritance, discrimination, education, employment, violence incited by state-sponsored propaganda, arbitrary arrests, and unlawful trials. Following the Islamic Revolution in 1979, these efforts were redoubled. Today, Baha'is undergo the same unfortunate treatment. As Baha'is in the Thousand Oaks community, we're very fortunate that we don't face these issues. But today, I would like to formally invite the Mayor and the council members to an event which we're having here at the Civic Arts Plaza on Thursday, September 15th, which we're entitling The Struggle for Human Rights in Iran, It would really mean a lot to us if you did attend. We know that your support in raising the importance of freedom of religion, both Baha'i faith and all religions, to our fellow congressmen and senators for our district is important, and we greatly appreciate your attendance. I do have information pamphlets put together for the mayor, mayor pro tem, and all the council members, which I will drop off at the city clerk, or I can give to the staff as well, and have individual address letters to you guys.
Right.
Thank you so much for hearing me tonight.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Nick Kidwai, followed by Marilyn Carpenter. Mr. Kidwai.
Nick Iqbal Kidwai, resident of Newbury Park, Director Concerned Citizen of Thousand Oaks. Glad to hear somebody from a minority religion is take to the podium. I would like to draw the attention of the council to a Republican candidate, Mr. Harriman. I forget his name. He's a African American, and it's unbelievable his comments Sunday that Muslims should really not be allowed to be under the cover of the First Amendment. I don't even want to get into the debate, but these are bad times in many ways. Government at all levels, from Sacramento with the budget crisis to the tonight's debt limit fiasco and circus in Washington, D.C., to this body over here, it's just I don't think, people think that they can just walk away from government and that somehow a magic wand will take care of the problems. We need to be more vigilant, 10 times more than we were 15 years ago when I got involved in this, and people were active and held the feet of the city council and staff. Last council meeting and all that, if I just talk about history or anything like that, I'm almost called out of order. Opposed to the summer hiatus, everybody should be. This is not Europe. It doesn't work in Europe. It doesn't work in Washington, D.C. In fact, the council is coming back not even on the first week of September, but September 13th. In between, if there are real issues, and there is one issue that I don't want to specifically talk about it because it's on the closed item, but our school district, according to the first page of the ACON, is going to need money soon. And if you can come up with some way to sell some of the properties or buy the properties so they have cash flow. I know there was complaints that even money for the TO pass agreement, which Mrs. Didio and others know about, that every year the redevelopment agency gave about $1 million to the Conejo Valley Unified School District from the redevelopment agency, that even that is in limbo. I would like to draw the attention to the two recent purchases, which seems like Governor Brown is not going to reverse. The 3 parcels next door for $3.5 million and a single parcel for about $600,000. You have no plan for it. It's disgusting to be in the real estate business. Either sell that property or get loans against it and give it to our kids. One councilwoman became elected because of the work she did on the stadiums. Maybe she can take up the mantle on this.
Thank you, Mr. Kidwai. Marilyn Carpenter, former planning commissioner, and William Stewart. All right. Good evening, Ms. Carpenter.
Good evening. Hi, how are you? I'm Marilyn Carpenter, Thousand Oaks. Really probably don't need to speak because Ken Free and Dolores DiDio expressed succinctly my same feelings that are in support of the Citizens Ad Hoc Water Rate Committee. They deliberated carefully. I thank the council for giving them an opportunity to look at the issues. I think they came up with a fair, equitable solution that treats all of us the same. Those of us who've been here forever, I think, 50 years in our home, we're getting old. We've tried our best to maintain our properties. We've got to be able to water a bit. We're trying carefully to conserve water where we can, but the flat rate fee, I think, allows those of us who use more water to pay our fair share.
Nobody gets a break in this. We all will pay equally, and I thank the council, and I hope that you will adopt the committee's recommendation. They worked hard to get there. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Carpenter. Our last public comment is William Stewart. Good evening, Mr. Stewart.
Mayor Fox, members of the council, I hadn't planned on speaking tonight, but my reason for being here, of course, is the hope that water rates will be normalized in the near future. I've been a resident of Thousand Oaks for about 30 years up in the Conejo Oaks area, and I've noticed a real change in the city over the past 2 years. Well, at least over the past 2 summers. Now, as a pilot, I very frequently fly over Thousand Oaks, and I've watched us turn from green to brown as people, myself included, allow our lawns to wither because we can't afford the exorbitant water rates to support people who don't perhaps have as much necessity to use water. Basically, what you see from the air is Thousand Oaks turning into Palmdale. If you want to have a desert community, just keep the very unrealistic rates you have now. If you'd like to see Thousand Oaks return to what it was, give us a commodity rate. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. That concludes the public comment portion for tonight's meeting. We're now going to move to our public hearings. Madam Clerk, we're going to call item 8A.
Hearing advertised as required by law is open to consider agenda item 8A, Specific Plan Amendment 2010-70476 to amend Specific Plan 15, Rancho Conejo Industrial Park, to allow automobile painting businesses with special use permit. Applicant Said Sabor. A speaker card is available for those wishing to address the City Council regarding this public hearing. All documents for City Council and the official city record should be presented to the City Clerk prior to speaking, and speakers are requested to state their name and community of residence for the record. We have 2 people who have presented cards, and pursuant to Council standards, the applicant is allowed 15 minutes with a 5-minute rebuttal, and the remaining speaker is allowed 5 minutes. The yellow light displays when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Ms. Lawrence. Ms. Young, you're going to provide the brief staff report on this item?
Yes.
Very good.
Good evening, Mayor Fox, members of the City Council. We have a request to allow auto painting in Specific Plan 15, which includes the Rancho Conejo Industrial Park. This area was annexed into the city from the unincorporated area in 1991. Specific Plan 15 ensured that there was consistency with uses and standards between the city and county zoning. And Specific Plan 15 allowed auto repair under the county with a special use permit. It excluded auto body work and painting. The applicant has requested to allow auto painting if all the work is conducted within an enclosed building and provided that it is outside 400 feet from any residential. The project is categorically exempt from CEQA, and last month the Planning Commission recommended approval of the specific plan amendment. Currently, the municipal code considers auto body painting as part of, or auto painting as part of auto body work. Specific Plan 15 allows auto repair with special use permit, but it specifically excludes painting and auto body work. Normally, auto repair is not even allowed in the M1 zone. This is a carryover from one of the county uses. At the Planning Commission hearing, the applicant requested approval that auto painting be allowed by a development permit rather than a special use permit in order to save money and time. The Commission and staff concurred that a special use permit would be the process to go, because that way we could look at certain nuisance noises, visibility issues, unsightly building, cars out there. And also auto repair itself requires an SUP in Specific Plan 15. Auto body repair, which auto painting is included, is only permitted in the M2 zone with a special use permit. Staff supports the amendment because limited auto painting is compatible with other activities and other uses in Rancho Conejo Industrial Park. We feel that 400 feet is adequate to be a buffer away from residential. The individual uses could be looked at on a case-by-case basis through the SUP process, and also that this type of use is strictly regulated through APCD, OSHA, and other regulations. The recommended ordinance adds a new code definition for auto painting so that it clarifies the ambiguity between auto repair and auto body work, and also amends Specific Plan 15 to allow auto painting within a building, and as long as it's 400 feet from residential. So the recommendation is to introduce the ordinance to allow auto painting businesses subject to a special use permit.
All right, thank you, Ms. Young. Questions for staff? All right, hearing none, we have just two speaker cards. Mr. Sellers for the applicant and Mr. Kidwai. Good evening, Mr. Sellers. Welcome back.
Good evening. Mark Sellers on behalf of the applicant, resident of Thousand Oaks, and here tonight on behalf of the applicant, who is the owner of a industrial park in the Rancho Conejo Specific Plan area. He has 27 units to various businesses that generate a good number of jobs for the local community. However, in the last few years, vacancies have gone up. We are, as we all know, in some economic difficult times, and he has been approached a number of times about businesses that wanted to conduct auto painting operations and businesses within his park. As indicated by staff, that is strictly prohibited now. We have filed this application basically utilizing a concept that I like to call form zoning. It's basically all activities will occur within an enclosed building. And in form zoning, the concept is that it's important how the building looks and how it appears to the outside. But what goes on inside that building is really not that important from a city or a zoning point of view. Not only will the activities be inside a building, but the painting activities will be inside a booth within the building where the actual painting will occur. And a lot has changed over the years since the ordinance was adopted and the specific plan was basically approved with regards to auto painting. The technology and the application and the air quality impacts and the type of paints have all changed and improved. So there's less of an impact than there was 30 years ago when the ordinance in the county area at the time was adopted. The one thing that we are requesting tonight, in addition to what staff is recommending, what the Planning Commission has recommended, is that we not burden these businesses with a special use permit. Again, we have a use that's in a building. It can't be seen. And it's an activity that doesn't generate noise. It's not like auto body repair, where you do have some air hammers and some uses that create a noise. It's very quiet. And if you look at the property, and it only applies to the specific plan in the Rancho Industrial Park, it's not citywide. If you look at the properties out in that particular specific plan area, they're all relatively large. They're all set back from the city streets. They all have landscaping in front of them. The visual impact is minimal if it ever will occur. Frequently, many of these garage doors are oriented towards each other, and they can't even be seen from the city streets. Yes, you could, when you drive through the industrial park, you can see what goes on with perhaps within this facility or an auto painting business if the garage door is rolled up. But then you look around and you see all sorts of activities going on with the garage doors rolled up, such as cabinetry, woodwork, where spray paints can be applied, similar to what we're requesting here tonight. The bottom line is I just don't think that the $11,000 to $3,000 cost to process a special use permit, the 3 to perhaps 6 month delay in lost rent really gets the city anything. It doesn't. There's not an impact out there that is not going to be totally enclosed within the space. The air quality issues are going to be regulated by the Air Quality Control District. The fire issues will be cleared with the fire department. Both of those public entities can shut down operations if the appropriate permits aren't obtained or there's something done in violation of their permits and their conditions. So we're seeking tonight to remove the request for special use permit to help reduce the number of vacancies in this specific area. And with that, unless there's any questions, I just wanted to turn it over for a comment from the applicant.
Questions from Mr. Sellers? Thank you, sir. Mike Mears? Well, I didn't have a card. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, my name is Saeed Sabur. I reside in Newbury Park. I put this application in back on October of 2010, and with the economy the way it is, city being slow, as not as busy as before, it took 10 months to get this to this point. What I'm afraid of, to go through a special use permit, being vacant for another 6 months or so, and that would impact our business and our building. So that's all I got to say about this.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Nick Kidway. 8A, right, Mr. Kidway?
Nick Kidwai, resident of Newbury Park, Director, Concerned Citizens of Thousand Oaks, Honorable Mayor, City Council. I was the only citizen, I guess, to speak on this issue in May before the Planning Commission, where you barely had a quorum of planning commissioners. Only 3. 2 were absent. I don't know why. I don't know why the Tea Party is. I mean, I'll just read the financial impact that staff talks about from your staff report verbatim. No additional funding requested. The fiscal impact is limited to the indirect cost of staff time to prepare and process the amendment and the minor direct cost of providing staff reports and public hearing notices, which are offset by the filing fee paid by the applicant. I'm glad that Mr. Sellers, who was an able city attorney, did an eloquent presentation, but I would like to read paragraph 5 from his July 19th letter to council, and I quote, he already said it, but it's better to read it verbatim line by line. It's 4 lines. 11,500 planning commission consideration. I don't know if that's consideration or taxation, or even a 3,155 processing cost, plus the loss of rent for a delay of 3 to 6 months to process the SUP, which is at $5,000 a month. A loss of $15,000 to $30,000 will have an adverse impact and result in longer and more vacancies in this economic recession. I had hinted about the projects at Wendy Drive interchange. I support the Lowe's development, but you have added 40,000 additional retail and office space in that project, which were not part of the city. In February, I took an inventory and took pictures in Newbury Park just to see, because in 1995, when the Seventh-day Adventist project was approved, your own staff report said that there will be cannibalism. I mean, people think cannibalism is in Africa or Amazon or something like that. This is cannibalism of the worst kind that Mr. Sabur probably knows about, where businesses are eating each other because there's ain't enough customers to go around. That's what the recession is all about. I documented, and I have them on Facebook for Concerned Citizens of Thousand Oaks, 92, and I dare say that if somebody goes out right now, it's well over 110 vacancies. This is, I mean, what is the charge of the city? Basically, you are a zoning body. That's what it is. In fact, number 4 of Mr. Seller's paragraph says, and I quote, "We do not need to have a second or redundant level of a city SUP when there is already the Air Quality Board and these other requirements to open this kind of business, which takes care of just about everything to a minute level." So why is it that you spend so much time on ridiculous meetings on auto mall signs and do not do anything about taking care of these issues? This was done. I was here in the 90s when this area was annexed from the county. It was not done properly, as it can be seen. You need to have staff come back with changes so that these people who are willing to invest in our community, who are the heroes of the United States and Thousand Oaks, the small businessmen, they do not have to go through these ropes. Unless, of course, I mean, staff can craft language that if concerned citizens or dozen neighbors object, then you have a hearing. But if they don't, should be done over the counter, maybe $100, $200 fee, not the $4,500 fee for a planning commission, where the planning commissioners do not take their job seriously and don't even show up. Thank you for letting me speak. I hope, besides approving this, that you will make the changes and do what is your duty to do, not just be proactive.
Thank you, Mr. Kidwai. That concludes the public comment cards. We'll go back to, is there questions for staff? Dr. Clancy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask staff their comments in response to the plea to make this an administrative process rather than SUP.
I'll answer that. A couple of points I'd like to make. First of all, the type of use that this gentleman would like to establish is an allowed use in the city's M2 zone with a special use permit. So if the application had been filed for land in the M2 zone, they would be probably all the way through the process by now. What the gentleman is really asking for is a change in the city zoning ordinance to allow this type of use, which wasn't even allowed by the county, into a different type of zone. And staff and the planning commission are willing to recommend and accept that, subject to the special use permit requirement. If you don't have that with an administrative process with a development permit, and this is the difference, as we explained in the staff report, between a development permit and a special use permit. If the use is allowed by development permit, there is a presumption that the use is acceptable anywhere within that zoning district, or in this case within the specific plan. The particular property that this gentleman has in mind is suitable, and we would recommend approval of the special use permit when it went through the process. But with a development permit, somebody could come in somewhere else in the zone, and we would not have the legal basis to deny it unless there was some violation of one of our codes, design regulations or something like that. The special use permit process is almost exactly what Mr. Kidway was talking about, where it does give the opportunity to provide notice to the neighbors, including the other tenants that might be in that same business park, and to look at that use and whether it really fits into that particular location. So another point I'd like to make is that we did offer at the beginning the opportunity to ask for concurrent processing of a special use permit along with this code amendment, and the applicant chose not to do that.
Thank you very much for the clarification.
Any other questions for staff? Ms. Irwin?
So does it take 6 months to get a SUP in this case?
No, it would not take that long.
What would
we would we would be able to get it to Planning Commission in most likely September or October at the latest.
Oh, so at the next, okay. And then could you give an example of a type of business where you really would want to control it with an SUP?
Type of business?
Yeah, in this area.
Well, the specific plan lists a large number. Auto repair is one of them. Various types of manufacturing businesses, any use that involve the sale or on-site consumption of alcoholic beverages, auto repair uses. Sometimes there's, even if they're done indoors, there's noise impacts associated with those. In that particular specific plan area, it does allow a variety of manufacturing uses that would be special use permit, swap meets, and retail sale of materials produced on site, recycling facilities and centers. It's typically a kind of a use that, again, the principle is it's not necessarily acceptable at every location in the zone, which is what a development permit use is.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Bilda-Lepena.
Mr. Prescott, just to reiterate, you say that in any other zone where this type of business is permitted, the applicant would have to go through an SUP as well?
There's a table. There's a table on packet page 15 which shows the areas where this type of use is allowed. And auto painting is under our code now, and part of the ordinance here would be to amend the code to create a separate definition for auto painting. But right now it's defined as part of auto body repair. And the only places it's allowed would be in the C2 AM, that's the auto mall zone, and there are footnotes there. It's by development permit if it's associated with an auto dealership, and a special use permit if it's an independent auto body repair business. And then in the M2 zone, it's allowed by special use permit. So those are under. Those are two different types of zones in the city where this use could go now without having to change our code.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Sellers, 5 minutes for rebuttal. Before you start, I'd like you to address why you did not pursue the concurrent processing.
We weren't offered that. I asked my client just now whether anybody mentioned that to him, and nobody had. We weren't aware that was something that was being suggested by city staff.
Are there normally records associated with that?
Pardon?
Are there normally records associated with that so we don't get into a he said, she said? I know you're familiar with the process, so I'm just going to ask, is there any documentation that would usually accompany that?
I have no documentation that staff suggested concurrent processing to avoid the time impact. When we had basically requested it, we requested a permitted right rather than a special use. It's the special use aspect that's creating somewhat of a heartburn now, rather than changing the specific plan to allow auto body as a permitted right, because the concept originally from us was that it's all within an enclosed building, there's no impacts. You talk about noise, well, there are machine shops in his industrial park that make far more noise than this auto painting facility will ever make. So the only issue generally in the past has been fumes and migration, and the technology is such today that doesn't occur.
You move forward.
Yeah, I was just basically going to comment. There's not a lot of M2 zoned area within this community. So why we're here tonight is because there is some M1 zone that's reasonable in size, and Rancho Industrial Park has a good number of these smaller industrial parks with vacant spaces that can be utilized for this kind of business, and that's why there has been a demand. That's why there's been a contact to the applicant. I think the whole concept here is everything is in an enclosed space. We can go through a lot of these industrial parks and look at uses and views that I think are going to be far worse than auto body painting within a booth within an enclosed building. Again, I just don't see the real need. It's not like we're going to put this in any M1 zone. It's just in this specific plan. It's not like we're proposing this along Thousand Oaks Boulevard or in commercial areas, which, yes, I agree, special use permits would be required. The second hearing tonight, we've got a special use permit for a storage facility. This is in an M1 zone, in an industrial park that is mitigated from the street by landscape and a design that these uses just aren't going to cause any impact. And if there is an impact, the landlord is going to address that up front. If the tenants are going to say, we just don't want that kind of use there, the landlord isn't going to put that use in there and then have other tenants move out. That just doesn't make sense. So again, the proposal that we suggest is allow this as a permitted use. It's all entirely within an enclosed building, and it's something that I just don't see the ramifications and impact like many other uses like were suggested, like serving of alcoholic beverages, and some of the other uses in residential or zones that abut residential areas. So with that,
okay.
Those are my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Sellers. All right, we'll close the public hearing, and we can have discussion or a motion. Ms. Bilda de Pena.
I would like to ask one more question of
Sure.
staff, and that is the development permit. Say what other remedies are there available for an applicant if he or she went through the DP? Is there an appeals process and so forth?
Well, yeah, development permit, and again, well, not again, but if a development permit, it's an entitlement, like a special use permit. The difference is that they would file the application if it met all the code requirements, and if the use were one listed under the development permit uses, it would be an administrative hearing. It would be an administrative process. We would send out notices, and if nobody objected or asked for a hearing, then we would approve it administratively. There would not be there would be a presumption that the use was acceptable at that location, and we would not have the ability, in my opinion, to defensively deny it on the basis that the use was not appropriate at that particular location, as long as it met other code requirements such as parking and landscaping and architectural design, those sorts of things. Any decision we make could be appealed to the Planning Commission and then could be appealed to you. But I think the way the code is structured and the types of findings that have to be made, it would be more difficult to deny a use on the basis that the use just wasn't right there if it was listed as a development permit use versus listed as a special use permit use.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions for staff? Mr. Prescott, let me nail down a couple of the issues, because I'm inclined to actually, I think Mr. Sellers raises some very good points with respect to staff's concern about precedent setting. It's an industrial park. Even if another spray operation wanted to open an industrial park, I don't see that as that detrimental to that. This is an industrial park, an industrial area, and spray painting is a highly regulated industry. It isn't like it was 40 years ago. So in terms of the the impacts on why we'd want to grant an SUP, I do have some serious questions. Notwithstanding that, the reasons articulated by the applicant are more money related than anything else, and the 6 months it would take to go through the process and then the fees. We're basically at the end of July, so if we were able to have a hearing in September, we're really talking about a little over a month. And I'm sure rents are per month. So tell the council a little bit more about, how quickly this would come forward, and then what's the likelihood that it would be approved?
The special use permit would have to be reviewed by the Planning Commission. The key timeline there is for the applicant to submit the plans, complete plans. Then we have to post the site and provide mailed notice 45 days in advance of any hearing, notice of application. So that would set the time frame. And during that 45-day period, we're doing the staff evaluation, writing the staff report and conditions. So I'd say realistically, minimum would be 60 days from now for a hearing, and that would assume the applicant could turn around and file the special use permit application.
So we're looking more realistically 3 months.
Well, I think it could be the second meeting in September would be the earliest.
Okay.
That's the fourth Monday in September. And it would be Planning Commission.
And then what's the filing fee for an SUP?
$11,515.
And for a development permit?
That I don't have.
We may want to have that figure. Is it dramatically different? Would be my sense.
Yeah, I think it's in the thousands. It's less than the special use permit, but we'd have to check the city fee schedule. And I'm not sure if we have a copy up here at in the chambers, but if not, it could be done in 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay, this will be over in 5. So, all right. We'll close the public hearing. What's the pleasure of the council? We don't have to make a motion. We can have some discussion unless somebody's inclined to move. Dr. Clancy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'd be more than happy to yield the floor.
Oh, you go ahead.
I'm pretty much in favor of having expedited processing and yet still maintaining control. I think if we can maintain our control to a relatively safe element, and as the mayor points out, the world of auto painting is pretty highly regulated and controlled by much larger bodies than ours, then I would have no problem at all with approving the application and also approving the use of the development permit vice the SUP.
Any other? Did you want to make a motion to that effect? I'm gonna support that, just for me, because I.
Also move.
All right. So Dr. Clancy moves the approval and amends it to include that this would be a development permit process as opposed to the SUP. Excuse me. Discussion.
Go ahead then.
Ms. Bildo-DePena.
Thank you. The attorney for the applicant does make some very good comments and gives very good reasons for going with the development permit rather than the SUP. I also noticed in the staff report that the reason staff, and you've mentioned that verbally already to us, would like to proceed with the SUP is because there could be other businesses coming before the city asking that could give you concern or give the city concern regarding parking, vehicle storage, roof equipment screening, and other site and aesthetic considerations. And of course, all of that depends on the neighboring businesses, whether it be a DP or an SUP, input from surrounding businesses is sought, and then the potential negative impacts would have to be mitigated, whether it be a DP or an SUP, the way I understand it. Okay, so I'm correct thus far. Money is always an issue, especially in this economy, but I cannot base my decision based on how much an applicant has to pay. I simply can't do that. What I can consider is whether it's reasonable to have a DP versus an SUP in an industrial area. And as the name indicates, the terminology indicates, industrial means industrial. There will be activities such as auto body painting or repair that are considered industrial that should actually be part of the whole consideration. So I don't need to know how much money it costs for the DP, or I don't need to know the time process either. It makes sense to me that to have a highly regulated business in an industrial area that has to go through a permitting process one way or another. It can be appealed if need be, and if it is appealed, then in the end it will cost more than $11,000 anyway if it has to go to the Planning Commission and then the City Council on appeal. And as a result of that, I will support the motion. And the motion means, obviously, staff has to go back to change our zoning code. In this case, for this particular project, SP 15, I think that is something that I can live with.
All right, further discussion. Dr. Glatz, I'm going to have you restate your motion just for clarification so everybody knows exactly what they're voting on.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, the recommendation is introduce the ordinance to allow automobile painting businesses as permitted use in specific Plan 15, subject to the approval of a development permit.
Okay, very good. It's very clear. Further discussion? I'm going to support the motion. I think staff raises some good points. However, in the environment that we're in and in the location that this business is being proposed, I think it just makes good common sense. It's an industrial park. There are many uses in an industrial park that have much greater impact in terms of environmental impact, noise, a whole variety of things than this particular business. It's a highly regulated business. Mr. Sellers is exactly correct. It's inside a building. Within the building, it's a spray booth. I've personally seen many of these through my career as a firefighter, and these are actually very clean operations. I don't anticipate any environmental issues or otherwise from the neighbors. So I think it just made good sense. And I think money is certainly not the determining factor from council, but we are supposed to be making decisions here that aren't just by the book, so to speak, but I think we do need to look at the economics of our decision-making process. And we force businesses through unneeded expenses that don't make sense, that are tied to laws that were 30 or 40 years old, that were county laws that we adopted. I think we can do better. So that's my thoughts on that. Dr. Glancy, any further comment?
No, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Vote, please.
The motion carries 4-0. I just wanted to clarify with the attorney that I can read the ordinance title and switch out special use permit with the development permit. An ordinance to amend the Thousand Oaks Municipal Code, Title 9, Appendix A, Specific Plan Number 15, Rancho Conejo Industrial Park, involving allowing painting of automobiles subject to approval of a development permit.
And that is approved, 4-0. All right, that concludes item 8A. We're going to now move to our second public hearing this evening, item 8B. Madam Clerk, could you call 8B for public hearing, please?
Hearing advertised as required by law is open to consider agenda item 8B, a zone change 2008-70687, special use permit 2011-70031, Land Division 2011-70032, Oak Tree Permit 2011-70033, allowing construction of an office and self-storage facility with caretaker residence. The applicant is Thousand Oaks Boulevard Storage Partners, located at 1259 East Thousand Oaks Boulevard, as well as a Municipal Code Amendment 2010-70543 to amend many storage facility standards within C2 zones citywide. The applicant is the City of Thousand Oaks. A speaker card is available for those wishing to address the City Council regarding this public hearing. All speakers are requested to state their name and community of residence for the record, and we have 5 speaker cards. The applicant is allowed 15 minutes with a 5-minute rebuttal, and the remaining speakers are allowed 5 minutes each.
Thank you, Ms. Lawrence. Mr. Town, you're going to provide the staff report?
Yes, I am.
1 second.
Mr. Mayor, I wanted to put on the record that in the course of this project's being in the works, I've had an opportunity to meet with the applicant a couple of separate times. It has no way in any way would it affect the way I...
Okay, very good. For the record, actually, I think I did too, a long time ago.
Long time ago.
That's right. All right, thank you for that. Go ahead, Mr. Town.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. This item involves the proposed construction of an office and a self-storage facility. So if I could direct your attention to the PowerPoint. It's actually a package of 5 different requests. The first is a zone change to change the zoning from C3, which is community shopping center, to C2, which is highway and arterial commercial on the back portion of the site. Second is an amendment to the municipal code with regard to self-storage facilities in the C2 zone. And the third is a special use permit to actually allow the construction of the buildings. The fourth is to divide one parcel into 2, and fifth is to allow 6 encroachments into off-site oak trees. This is the property looking west, so as you can see, it's located on the north side of Thousand Oaks Boulevard, and Rancho there's to the west, and Hillcrest is to the north. And it's sandwiched between 2 plazas, and the parcel is overall about 2.5 acres in size. This is an image of the site looking north from the opposite side of Thousand Oaks Boulevard. As you can see, it's currently being used for a used car and trailer sale operation. And you can also see the change in grade as you look deeper into the lot. There's quite a significant change in topography. In terms of background, this same basic proposal came before you back in 2007, and at that time the council denied the proposal due to concerns over the forthcoming Thousand Oaks Boulevard draft specific plan and the related vision statement. And obviously you have now seen the draft Thousand Oaks Boulevard specific plan. It was provided to the city in April of 2009, and recently we had our joint study session on it. But it's important to know that that draft specific plan does identify self-storage facilities as a permitted use within the specific plan area with a special use permit. And based on that action, in December of last year, you authorized concurrent processing of the SUP before you, as well as the zone change, and you also initiated the MCA. Just recently, on June 27th, the Planning Commission considered this case and recommended unanimous approval on a 5-0 vote for the entire package. So in terms of the actual components, the zone change, as I mentioned, it would change the back part of the parcel from C3 to C2. It's now C3. We want to go to C2, so the whole parcel would be C2. And that would affect about 1.5 acres. As I mentioned, C3 is for community shopping centers, and the actual area for that zoning standard is typically 10 to 40 acres in size, and obviously this is way below that. The proposed C2 zoning is compatible with other properties in the area and compatible with the land use element designation of commercial. Also, self-storage is not a permitted use in the C3, but it is in the C2, as I mentioned, with an SUP. The MCA would basically change the standards within which self-storage facilities are allowed in the C2 zone. They're already allowed in the M1 and M2 zones, but only in the C2 zone under specific conditions, and these are identified here. The self-storage operation has to be accessory to a retail use. The retail has to be on the street with the storage buildings behind, and then there are other criteria in terms of size of the overall site as well as the individual rental spaces. The proposed changes to the C2 zone or with respect to self-storage would allow either office or retail along the street. The storage buildings would still have to be behind those structures, but now we would also include a distance, a buffer zone, so to speak, of a minimum 100 feet. In the project before you, the storage buildings are a minimum 170 feet from the street, so it's almost twice as far. And then it would also have a restriction in terms of only being applicable to lots with a lot depth that is greater than 4 times their width. So what that does is basically limit the sort of population of parcels that this could apply to the really deep and narrow lots. The parcel before you tonight is about 4.5 times as deep as it is wide. The SUP would allow the construction of the office. It's about 3,200 square feet, and the self-storage, it's about 92,000 square feet. Also, there would be a caretaker residence. Staff believes that it is an appropriate use because of the lot configuration. The project complies with all of the city standards on architecture, parking, and landscaping. And the special feature of this proposal that was not in the previous is that the office building that is proposed on the front side of the project would be donated to many mansions. This is a photo simulation of the project looking northwest. So on the left in this image is the office building that is being proposed for dedication to many mansions. On the right would be the office and caretaker's residence for the self-storage, and then the actual storage buildings, as I mentioned, are in the background. This is the photo sim looking in a northeasterly direction, and again, many mansions. Building would be there in the foreground, and the caretaker and office space for the facility in the background. This is a site plan, and it's actually composed of 2 parts here. It's not real easy to read in this image, but basically what we're looking at tonight are 5 different buildings, and that would include the 2 structures near the boulevard and then 3 storage structures behind. This is the portion of the lot closest to Thousand Oaks Boulevard. This is the image of the back part of the lot showing the 2 storage buildings in the rear. As far as the land division goes, again, that would divide the 1 parcel that it is today into 2 parcels. The smaller parcel would be the one on which the Many Mansions office is located, and it would be about 0.29 acres in size. The existing parcel is legal and non-conforming because it doesn't meet the lot depth and width ratio. The proposed new little lot would meet those standards, but the remaining big lot would still not. So the proposed land division would not result in a greater number of non-conforming lots. So staff thinks that's a reasonable proposal. And then on the oak tree permit topic, the request is to allow encroachment into 6 oaks. They're all off-site. None are on-site. They're composed of 2 valley oaks, 2 live oaks, and 2 holly oaks. No pruning is requested, but again, because it encroaches within the protected zone, which is a little bit larger than the canopy, this is part of the proposal before you. So in summary, the recommendation from staff is that the council introduce the ordinances and adopt the resolutions to approve the following items as listed here, including the mitigated negative declaration and mitigation monitoring plan, the zone change municipal code amendment, SUP land division, and oak tree permits. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for staff? Ms. Bilde-LaPena.
Thank you. Mr. Town, I was just wondering if this particular project is also affected by the hydrology in the underground. What is it? The watershed or channel that is running underneath some of the other businesses farther east on Thousand Oaks Boulevard?
That Ventura County Watershed Protection District easement does cross this property, but the site plan has been designed to actually avoid that, so the buildings do not encroach upon it. It's actually located between the first and second storage buildings, and it's a 30-foot wide easement, but there's no impact on that easement. Notice was, of course, provided to the Watershed Protection District. They submitted a letter simply reiterating their desire that no structures be located on it, including overhangs, and as designed, it would not affect that easement.
And are there any existing businesses that will be replaced as a result of this project?
The only business that would be replaced is the existing used car operation.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right. Mr. Sellers for the applicant.
Good evening. Mark Sellers for the applicant. This, I think, is one of the more unique projects I've ever been involved with. This is a project that comes before the city where the applicant is willing to dedicate a building worth $1.5 million to a local nonprofit affordable housing group. Why is he doing that? He basically has looked at the project, looked at the size of the retail facility that previously was a retail facility, determined he's not in that type of business. He doesn't want to be a landlord. It makes more sense to get somebody in there that will own it and be there on a long-term basis. That's why we came up with Many Mansions, who's for many years has wanted a bigger presence on the boulevard and identity for that organization. This parcel is a very challenging parcel to develop. It's a long, narrow parcel. Right now, about the only use that conceivable to me, anyway, would be a used car lot or perhaps a very narrow driving range. There's just areas in the back that can never be seen from the boulevard. There are areas in the back that are going to be very difficult to be accessible with an office project. We did a best use study that came up with the conclusion that what's being proposed is the only viable use for a good number of reasons. For example, it's a right turn in, right turn out location. There are beautiful pine trees in front of this particular parcel. Those pine trees are inconsistent with a retail use and would have to be either substantially trimmed or removed for a retail use. There are views of the back of a shopping center that wouldn't make this a good site for offices. And basically what you have before you is the only viable use that we can dream of for this particular difficult site. We have the approval of the residential uses behind. They are favorable to this project because of its low impact, very low traffic generator. It has security. It's something that is very compatible with the adjoining residential uses. I'm a member of TOBA. We've put together the specific plan for the boulevard, and in that specific plan, the concept most important to the boulevard is what happens in the first 100 feet. And that's a visual impact. That's an impact that will basically have high ceilings, beautiful windows, a presence that's inviting to pedestrians and people to stop and walk the boulevard. And this project provides that. What happens behind that is screened and is a good distance from the boulevard. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Mears, the architect, to go over the presentation on the project.
Mr. Sellers, Councilmember Bill LaPena has a question for you.
Thank you. My question is, when would construction commence and how long would it last? If it were
obviously approved? Construction, we need to do construction drawings, and maybe Mr. Mears can answer that as to how long that will take and pull building permits. I think the goal here is to get this within the next 10 months.
Thanks.
All right. Mr. Mears.
Mike Mears, project architect with David Hibbert Architects in Santa Monica. Our goal with the project was to provide a project that had office building character and office parking character. We worked very closely with staff for a very long time to configure the project, locate the buildings, the massing of the buildings, and the enhanced materials. We've got materials, limestone accents and cornices. The roof, there was a question about the roof. The roof is a brown tone roof, buckskin. Staff has a sample of that material on a color board that we'd provided. The two buildings in the front are essentially in a sort of screening position for the buildings in the back, although the buildings in the back are of the same character, materials, finishes as the buildings in the front. There's no step down to the quality of materials on the rear buildings. There's landscaping screening those buildings also, and we are preserving the street trees, which are mature trees. On the west side of the project is screened by the gas station development on the corner, and on Rancho Road, two office buildings that are existing provide some of the screening of the office from the project from the west. There's a gap between those buildings. We're going to plant that with some tree screening, planting. So the goal was to provide a project that was commercial in character, office park in character, and we think we've accomplished that. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Sam Sabor. Very good. Mario Diaz. Okay. Rick Schrader.
Mayor Fox, members of the City Council, members of City staff, I am Rick Schrader, president of Many Mansions. Many Mansions is located here in Thousand Oaks. We do support this project. This donated office building of some 3,000 square feet will obviously represent a benefit to Many Mansions. It will result in savings for us of between $60,000 and $70,000 a year. But really, it's also a benefit, we believe, for the community. Many Mansions provides more than housing. We also provide life-enriching services for our residents, and we think that's an essential component of responsible, affordable housing, to actually have on-site services for the residents. For the children, we are trying to break that cycle of poverty through educational programs. For the adults, especially the disabled and homeless adults, we're trying to get those members back into our community, back into the job market, to become productive members of our society. But that all requires money. Recently, I was at a conference put on by HUD with some other members of the city staff, and HUD indicated that most of their programs, their funding is being cut. CDBG funding, funding for homeless, disabled individuals are all facing very drastic service cuts. So we're looking for creative ways to provide these services through additional revenue sources. At this particular office building with the savings, we'll be able to provide these services. At our Hillcrest project, our Hillcrest apartment complex, which we hope to begin construction in October, once completed, we'll be providing an after-school tutoring program, summer camp program, programs for the homeless individuals that will be living there. So this donated office building, I think, is a creative and innovative way to allow us to provide these services. We support the project, and really only Many Mansions has an interest in that particular site as being an office building. It's near two of our large affordable housing complexes. It's near our Housing Central office. It provides an additional presence on the boulevard so we can better serve the residents of Thousand Oaks. So we support the project, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Schrader. That concludes our speaker cards. Go back to staff. Anything staff wants to add? All right, very good. Close the public hearing, and we'll entertain a motion. Ms. Bilda La Pena.
I'm ready to make a motion, but before I do that, I have one last question for staff. The applicant is donating the office building to Many Mansions, and it's about 3,000 square feet. And I wonder how a building that is 3,000 square feet can cost. I think the amount mentioned by Mr. $1.5 million. Yes, how a 3,000 square foot building can cost $1.5 million. Is it marble flooring or is I'm not sure.
It's the building and the land itself. They'll be the owner of the land and the building, and the finished cost is about $300 a foot. So,
all right, thank you. And with that, I'm ready to approve the staff recommendations for item 8B, and that would be recommendations 1 through 6.
Okay, very good. Ms. Buell, opinion moves 8B, items 1 through 6. Discussion on her motion. Ms. Irwin.
Thank you. I will support the motion. These storage units I've mentioned before are not my favorite use, but I certainly understand the restrictions on the land and the very big benefit to one of our nonprofit housing providers. So we've made this into a much better project, and I am able to support it. Thank you.
Further discussion? All right, vote please.
The motion carries 4-0, and I have 2 ordinance titles to read. An ordinance amending the code relating to official zoning map and changing zoning classification of property located 1259 East Thousand Oaks Boulevard. Zone change 2008-70687, and ordinance amending Thousand Oaks Municipal Code Section 9-4.1302 to revise development standards for many storage facilities in C2 zone, MCA 2010-70543.
All right, that concludes that item. That'll conclude our public hearings for this evening, and we're going to now move to item 11. That's the committee, commission, and board reports. Item 11A is the Youth Commission annual report, and I believe we have some members of our Youth Commission to make that report. We have a Youth Commission Chair, Hannah Hong. Good evening.
Good evening. Mayor Fox, council members, city manager, and staff. I am Hannah Hong, chair of the Thousand Oaks Youth Commission. First, I would like to introduce some of the commissioners that are here tonight. Vice Chair Sean Sauté, Commissioner Jake Colehep, and Commissioner Gabriella Brignardello. Thank you for letting us share our accomplishments and future goals with us this evening. Tonight, we will report on outreach, successful annual programs, youth implementation plan, and the commissioner's goals for the future. I would like to introduce Vice Chair Sean Sauté, who will talk about some of those programs.
Thank you, Hannah. Good evening, Mayor, Council, and staff. One of the many challenges faced by teens with special needs is the lack of opportunity to enjoy the same range of experiences available to others. Our goal with this event is to provide them a prom-like experience that they might not have otherwise. We would like to thank the city CRPD and the fabulous Thousand Oaks Teen Center, the fire department heroes that had dinner with our participants, and the 30 businesses and over 50 volunteers that supported the 21st annual Therapeutic Dance, which, as you can see, was my favorite theme, Ultimate Heroes. This year, we had a wonderful martial arts performance by Jacob Flames Studios, located here in Thousand Oaks. It was truly a fantastic show, and the performers were great with the guests. We also had dinner from Command Performance, which was delicious, and I, along with some of the other commissioners, learned a lot about the art of catering. In the night alone, we served over 150 people in about 20 minutes. A very generous Westlake High School student created a beautiful city backdrop so our guests could return home with a quality souvenir photograph as shown in the picture there. And also youth/teens play an active role in supporting the community. They volunteer their time, talent, and creativity to benefit hundreds of organizations. The Youth Commission hosts the annual Youth Recognition Award ceremony to honor these teens. This year, we received over 127 nominations from schools and agencies in the community, and 72 students received awards on May 18th in this theater from Mayor Pro Tem Irwin and Councilmember Glancy.
Thank you. And as you recall, in February 2010, the Commission hosted a leadership summit where students shared thoughts on challenges and solutions for community youth with local leaders. Subsequently, the Commission compiled all the information received and developed an implementation strategy plan to accomplish those goals. In September 2010, the plan was complete and approved by City Council, and implementation began. In addition to the commissioners, about 30 volunteers attended regular meetings and chose 4 areas to work on in the 2010-2011 term goals. Those goals included combating student stress and bullying and improving youth resources and recreation activities. Sean and Jake, would you provide more detail?
Commissioner Ramirez-Davis was the stress team leader. Immediately following the summit, the Conejo Coalition for Youth and Families met and decided that one of the things we could help do to face this challenge was to have a meeting in the fall of each year with service agencies. This provided many adults such as police, resource officers, CRPD, city and agency staff involved with teens an opportunity to learn about available resources in their community in case a teen needed help. It was a very successful first event and is planned again for the fall of 2012. We also invited speakers to our televised meetings to provide information on how to be better prepared and less stressed during the exam and preparing for college process. And of course, we had to do something fun. The stress and recreation teams collaborated and hosted an older teen event to help relieve stress in a time when college preparation was at its peak. With the help of the fabulous Teen Center staff and our adult representative, Jay Dodwell, we planned and executed a successful dodgeball night and had an amazing time. We weren't sure if people could come, but as you can see, it was well received. Over 100 high school students attended. In the beginning of the year, I made the mistake of introducing my team as the fun team and to help appeal to a wider range of people. Long story short, it stuck with us and worked. This year, we collaborated with the Teen Center Advisory Committee to try and appeal to older groups of teens. We helped with advertising the dodgeball event and researched hosting an outdoor event later. The team also made the decision to use some of the funds raised through rummage sales and businesses to co-host the Teen Video Festival. The funds we raised allowed us to have screenings outdoors, something our team had been longing to do. So thanks to the Oaks, we had our wish granted and hosted the screenings outdoors, and over 100 people attended. Additional funds and donations were also allowed us to provide scholarships, gift certificates, and certificates to the winners so they too could pursue their dreams. The following is a short video clip from the overall Best Video category, Stranded by Brandon Tizer.
Oh, hey, Mandy.
Hey, boys.
Dog, I'm gonna get with her tonight. That was so crazy. Oh.
Claire, hey, I'm glad you came. Yeah. Thanks for inviting me. No problem. Come on in. Let's go have a drink. You're from Colorado, right? Yeah. It's a lot warmer here. Well, I hope you like it. I think I'm starting to. Brian, make us some drinks. Hey. Ready? 3, 2, 1.
You can see all of the winning videos and award photos on the city website or on our Facebook page. The videos are stunning and of very high quality, so I encourage all of you to check it out. Commissioner Kohlhepp, will you talk about the next two teams?
Good evening, Mayor and Council members.
Commissioner Sklavenites led the bullying team. Her team decided that students needed to take responsibility for combating bullying by helping those that are bullied, encouraging other students to not spread rumors, and not provide those that bully the attention they are looking for. This team researched laws and resources to share with students and officials to raise awareness. That information was shared in local school newspapers. This team also founded the Anti-Bullying Society Club, or the ABS Club, at Westlake High School, and recommendations to other schools to start clubs are pending. To spread the importance of stopping bullying, team members have also spoken at schools and school board meetings and invited the Ventura County District Attorney's Office to discuss cyberbullying at our televised meetings. The third goal, to improve access to volunteer opportunity and resource information, was accomplished through the renovation of the volunteer newsletter, local activism, and a resource center plan. A business plan for a community resource center in the mall was developed by the resource team for a joint project with various senior adult agencies. Database locations and names were researched. The name Caneo Connection was well received. This is an ongoing project in search of funding and location. Another team project included the redoing of the volunteer and social services newsletter and school and agency links, as well as development of additional advertisements. A video ad was created for this newsletter. It was distributed and was played at several schools. The newsletter was also actively presented to middle schools through ASB and Boys and Girls Clubs. Several members of the resource committee gave presentations about the Youth Commission and the volunteer newsletter. These presentations, made before the District Advisory Council and the school board, helped the Youth Commission receive an honorary service award. And this is the award we received. We're very thankful for the honor that the District Advisory Council gave to us and the PTA. So thank you. I'd now like to invite Commissioner Hannah Hong up.
Thank you, Commissioner Collette. As he indicated, one of the results of our outreach and hard work this year was being awarded the District Area Council Award for Outstanding Service to Children and Youth. This is a great honor for us, and we appreciate the District PTA for the nomination. Each year, we invite community agencies and guest speakers to attend our meetings to share information of interest to the teen community. This year, we had a fabulous organizer. Commissioner Bernardello, would you please tell us more about this program?
Okay, so this year we had some amazing guest speakers. Geared toward the youth of Thousand Oaks, the speakers not only spoke on prevalent topics in teens' lives today, but also talked about service opportunities for the youth in our area. At the televised meeting, the youth commissioners and the youth attendees were able to hear about the problems of cyberbullying and sexting from the Ventura County District Attorney's Office, and were also given advice on how to fix this community issue. In addition, a local college consultant and a university admissions officer offered tips on the college application process. In addition to the important topics that were discussed, the youth were presented with opportunities to expand their involvement in the community, whether it be through active participation in Boy and Girl Scouts of America, or volunteering at Casa Pacifica, the local Boys and Girls Club, the Hospice of the Conejo, the Living Resource Center, the Conejo Park and Rec District, or the Thousand Oaks Library. We are so fortunate to have such enthusiastic and informative guest speakers this year, and we are very thankful for the time that they took to come and speak at our meetings and share with us and the youth community. Thank you.
We have some great goals for next year, and additional goals will also be decided on by our new commission when we convene in September. Our main goal next year is to host the 2012 Youth Leadership Summit. This will allow us to evaluate our progress on the past suggestions and concerns and learn new ones. We hope that many of the leaders and youth in this room will be able to attend. Other goals include greater school representation, continuation of the great guest speaker panels, continued improvement of our annual programs, and being fiscally and environmentally responsible. If you would like more information about our programs or how to be involved, check out our webpage at www.toaks.org/youth. Like us on Facebook or email youthcommission@toaks.org.
Now we would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions from the council for the commission? Ms. Irwin.
Well, questions and a few comments. I'm glad to see that you've already decided you're going to be hosting the video awards again.
We did.
Oh, okay. And then the two other programs that you had, the bullying I know is a huge issue, and the stress release. Are you deciding in September whether you're going to be doing those things again?
Yes, in September we will be continuing and discussing our further actions.
Oh, very good. And I know that we always compliment you guys and say, I mean, it is an outstanding group of young people serving us on the Youth Commission, but I am not sure, as long as I've been on the council, that you have had as productive a year as you did this year. Really amazing how you set the goals based on what you found out at the Youth Summit and really attained a lot of them this year. So I want to congratulate you. And then, which ones of you are seniors? Do you want to? Why don't you just tell us where you're going next year? And I think everybody should give a big round of applause to our seniors.
I will be attending University of Washington and majoring in biology.
Sean.
And I will be attending Purdue University studying aviation technology.
Fantastic. You guys are very impressive. Thank you.
Any other questions? Dr. Clancy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For Commissioner Colehep, you talked about four of the items that you're using to improve volunteer opportunity in the community, the last of which was the Community Resource Center. What is the status of that? Is that currently on hold, or did you not have good luck in working with them all?
So the status of that right now is we completed a plan as a committee, and then we submitted that plan, and it was combined with several other organizations' plans, and that plan was submitted to the council offices. Right now it's pending. I believe we were looking at several different options, a few of them having to do with having a kiosk in the mall, combining it with either the police resource center or having it up in front in the guest services area. So by providing a service to the mall for free, we would also be getting that space to fulfill our goals in this area. So to the best of my knowledge, the plan is still inside the council offices being considered based on funding and the need for a staff person.
Okay, thanks for the explanation. I want to reiterate what Mayor Pro Tem said in congratulating all of you for the job that you've done for the community and the youth in our community. And it's such an impressive group of people to work with. And thank you very much for your efforts.
Thank you.
All right. Great job, guys. The recommendation is to receive the report. Oh, Ms. Bill Pena, I'm sorry.
Thank you. It does appear that this has been a very, very productive year for you. I am very impressed. And I do have a couple of questions. First of all, because of all of the goals that you have set for yourself, how many hours do you actually have to work on it? It seems like a lot. That's my first question. And the second question is about the anti-bullying program, which is very important. What sort of feedback are you getting on that from the students? So whoever would like to answer the first and or the second.
So in regards to the first question regarding how many hours we spend, it depends on what program. All the different commissioners are assigned different duties and have different responsibilities. And naturally, some of us will do different number of hours, but it is a considerable amount. Some months are more busy because we have more programs located in that month. For example, the first 2 months are usually not too bad, but then usually during the middle of the school year it gets a little bit more accelerated, and then near the end it's a little bit more work also. So it's a considerable number of hours because we meet twice a month, every month, and usually we have at least on average probably about one outside event on top of that we have to run and organize. So it's a lot of hours. And your second question was in regards to the bowling program, as in what's being done in the bowling program, or
the feedback that you are receiving from students who are participating, or any sort of feedback that you can measure as to how effective it is and whether it is reducing.
So
bullying.
Currently there's actually we don't have a implemented program in the schools. We have a club located in Westlake High School. That's the only school that has currently developed a club, because of course clubs, we can't force a school to start a club. We have to have a student in the school write the Constitution and get at least 8 members, I think in most schools it is, to join the club and then start the club. So within Westlake High School, we've had that club developed, and they're going through different options that the students can do to stop bullying. But I've heard that club is very popular at Westlake High School, and the commission though has not implemented a program that's costing us money. We've encouraged through our connections in the schools to get them to start these clubs and work the problem out themselves, because bullying is one of those things that it's something that happens within the school, and there's only so much that you can do to stop it. You have to get the students to want to end it themselves.
Thank you. I am impressed that you're able to juggle your schoolwork in addition to preparing for college, as well as doing all of these activities and setting the goals for this year. So congratulations.
Okay. The recommendation to receive the report, and that'll be the order if there's no objection. Okay. Great job, guys. Move to item 11B, and that's the Thousand Oaks Civic Arts Plaza Foundation. And the chair of the committee is Dr. Jerry Miller.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor Fox and members of the City Council. I am Jerry Miller, Chairman of the City of Thousand Oaks Cultural Affairs Commission and Vice President of the Thousand Oaks Civic Arts Plaza Foundation. Tonight I am bringing before you the first recommendation from this relatively new commission. The recommendation is for the City Council to approve co-promotes and percentage deals for the Thousand Oaks Civic Arts Plaza Foundation in order for it to sponsor higher risk attractions in both the Kavli and Share Forum theaters. The Thousand Oaks Civic Arts Plaza Foundation is the in-house presenting arm of the Civic Arts Plaza. Recently, the City Council assigned priority number 10 for the 2011-2012 season to the Cultural Affairs Commission, reading as follows: to increase attendance at the Kavli Theater and Share Forum and enhance the variety of programming, including more popular and contemporary shows. To do this, the Civic Arts Plaza Foundation must take greater financial risks to sponsor popular and contemporary shows in both theaters. By approving co-promotes and percentage deals, the City Council will be waiving theater rent, box office facility fees, and certain soft costs, such as lamp charges, for selected shows sponsored by the Civic Arts Plaza Foundation. Waiver of these fees will mitigate the financial risk that the Foundation will be taking to comply with the City Council priority for more popular and contemporary shows. An additional 2-page document has been provided that incorporates the recommendation of our Commission and references 7 performances which will be offered under this new approach, with more to be scheduled in the months ahead. Approval of this recommendation will enable the TOCAP Foundation to present more popular and contemporary shows in the 2011-2012 season. Theater Director Tom Mitzi is with us this evening as well and is available to answer specific questions related to our recommendation. We thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Questions for Dr. Miller? Ms. Bill de la Pena.
Well, it may be either for Dr. Miller or for Mr. Mitzi, and that is about the financial aspect. You're asking the city to basically help you take a risk or soften the blow financially by waiving some of the fees, and I'm wondering, is that going to be then a hit on our general fund?
No, this would be
the theaters
enterprise fund.
Okay. All right, thank you. And I hope that this will work out. It's a pilot program, but I'm hopeful that it will be successful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We see this as an avenue toward a better future and a stronger future. We've engaged the African group with Jeff Appergan as the principal of that group. He is known nationally and internationally for presentation of top-level shows and for responsibility both financially and accountability for productions. He also is headquartered right here in Westlake Village and views this relationship as something of a neighborly service to the community that he so much embraces as well. So we see great promise for this approach.
Other questions, Ms. Irwin?
Well, we shouldn't waste the opportunity to promote those 7 acts. I see that you have Bare Naked Ladies and Chris Isaac. Can you mention what the other acts are?
They're identified in the pass-out, but interesting you noted the particular one you did, and we'll have special tickets for that event. Bare Naked Ladies, to be presented in the Kavli Theater, Benice and Chris Isaac. 4 shows to be presented in the Share Forum, Heart and Soul, The Troubadours, Rhythm of the Night, and Viva Las Vegas. And this is just a start in the early months of this fall. As approval goes forward for this proposal, more will follow in the months ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
We have a speaker card, Nick Kidway.
Good evening, Dr. Miller. Nick Kidwai, resident of Newbury Park, Director Concerned Citizens of Thousand Oaks. And I would just like to make some comments. You know, the theater was built on the promise that no general fund money would be spent. And I and a lot of the other people would still like to hear I am sorry comment. I mean, you know, Murdoch even made very good apologies. I, for one, believe and support the arts, so I don't really have a problem with the funds. But there's a lot of people, like just right now, the Tea Party thing in the debt ceiling got passed. I mean, and there's a lot of folks in this city that do not want. We want you to be on the core business, which is zoning, land use, just like we heard earlier on with the public hearing, Mr. Mayor. The thing that is not being talked about, which if you have read the Ventura County Star blogs about the articles on the theater, are the outrageous Ticketmaster fees and the positive comments about the justification of them by the director. I mean, the fees alone, I mean, people have written, I mean, we don't have, this is not Beverly Hills or Brentwood, that the fees alone, convenience fee, it's not a convenience fee, it's an inconvenient fee for my wallet. I mean, it's not a convenience fee. I mean, you should just eliminate Ticketmaster. Look at that. That should be on the agenda. There are other companies who are doing it too, and some people, staff has commented and said, well, you can just drive up. I mean, maybe it's not too bad for me to drive up, but this is supposed to be a regional facility, and people are not going to drive up from Oxnard to buy tickets to save inconvenience fees. I'm surprised that the good doctor mentioned the show. I mean, I saw it. The picture is very nice. I don't really like it. With 4 men there, with a couple with beards. It's called Bare Naked Ladies. I mean, this community, you know, does not allow any dancing or dancing girls on Thousand Oaks Boulevard. I mean, you have to go to Oxnard and the Valley. There's a dozen plus massage parlors. It's okay. I mean, Hooters was coming, and maybe staff would come. I was looking forward to it, but it looks like it has stopped because there was so much comments about this being a family-oriented society or community. The thing that bothers me and a lot of other people is, I mean, this thing about risk-taking. I mean, who's taking the risk? The taxpayers. We are taking the risk, and I can see the Kavli being subsidized and having a high cost, but for this theater, the shows, I mean, this is a theater which even I can afford. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Mr. Kidway. All right, what's the pleasure of the council on 11B? Ms. Billo-DePena.
I move staff recommendation, and I believe in the supplemental packet, the recommendation does it read differently from what was in the staff report? Because this is a supplemental one. It is different?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Well, then the recommendation would be as stated in the supplemental packet, authorize Cultural Affairs Director to waive rent, tickets, surcharges, and soft costs. And just for the record, nobody is naked in bare naked ladies.
Thank you for that. Discussion on the motion? All right, hearing none, vote please.
The vote shows Dr. Glancy dissenting. Is that incorrect?
That's incorrect.
Okay. Motion carries 4-0.
All right, that is approved. We're going to take a brief recess, and then we're going to come back and conclude the balance of our agenda, starting with 11C, which is the Water Rate Committee recommendation. So we're going to take a brief recess. Yeah, actually, while we're in recess, we'll handle our closed session items as well. Madam Clerk, you want to read those into the record?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, members of the public. The council will be going into closed session conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, Ito versus the State of California, Department of Transportation, and the City of Thousand Oaks, Otal. This is pursuant to Government Code Section 54-956.9, subsection A, as well as conference with real property negotiators, parcel located at southeast corner of 310 Kelly Road and 1872 Newberry Road, Thousand Oaks, agency negotiators, Scott Mitnick, City Manager Amy Albano, negotiating parties for Conejo Valley Unified School District, Dr. Jeffrey Barstead, Dr. Joel Kirshenston, under negotiation price and terms pursuant to Government Code Section 54-956.8. Thank you.
All right, and we'll be in recess. We recognize all of you are here for the water deal. We'll do this as soon as we can. Now to item 11C. That's the Community Water Rate Structure Committee recommendations. And Mr. Watkins, you're going to provide the staff report?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor Fox, members of the council, members of the public. With me on the dais, I have Joanne Kelly. Joanne's the Public Works Resource Division Manager, does the water rate and water financial plans every 2 years, and also Douglas Tapking. Mr. Tapking is a member of the Community Water Rate Structure Committee and was chosen by the committee to report out on the committee's actions. Very quickly, a little bit of background, how we got to where we are. We do a financial plan every 2 years for both the water and the wastewater system. When that financial plan was completed in 2007, one of the recommendations was to pursue a tiered rate to promote conservation. So 2 years later, in accordance with the annual adoption of the budget, the financial plan was done. It included a tiered rate structure. And that tiered rate structure was approved and went into effect in November of 2009. We also had then a rate increase as a pass-through from the Metropolitan Water District, Southern California, and Cayugas in July of 2010. And so last summer, the summer of 2010, is when most of our ratepayers saw both the impacts of tiered rates during a summer season and an increase in their water bills, and there was two large increases in a row. So by the end of that summer and going into the fall of 2010, we started hearing from some of these folks, especially folks who had larger lots and were experiencing very high water bills. Those folks came to council during public comments and got city council's ear also, and the city council asked staff to return with a proposal to form a water rate structure committee. And that committee was approved in October 2010 and then went through the application interview process and was finally seated in January 2011. The committee consisted of representatives from all of our different service classes. So there's a 15-member committee was chosen by City Council with 2 members each from single-family high usage, single-family average, single-family low, and then commercial irrigation and multifamily. And then there was 3 at-large members. The committee was tasked with looking at the water rate structure, reviewing the structures from surrounding communities, determining what really made sense for the city of Thousand Oaks, and then bringing that back to the city council. They also had a set of guiding principles approved by the City Council that the rates should be fair and equitable. They should promote efficient water use, support the enterprise, be consistent with local practices, in compliance with all laws and regulations, and then also be reasonable to administer. So starting in January, the committee met 9 times from January through June, reviewed and analyzed many different options. On the right-hand side is just some examples of some of the different data that the committee looked at, just showing it in a highlight, everything from the water rates, how the plumbing works throughout California, to the environmental impacts of Delta smelt, to all kinds of different graphs, charts, and other types of things. And I need to add also that there was also a number of member proposals that were reviewed. It was a very good committee, very focused, very dedicated, committed to the work, and a number of the committee members did a fair amount of work outside the committee meetings and brought those proposals back into the committee. Just very simply, looking at rate structures and what type of rate structures exist, this kind of shows from the most basic to a more complex type of rate structure. The most basic being a flat rate. These are some of the systems that are no longer legal in California, but they have existed in Northern California. That's where there are no water meters. Everybody pays the same amount regardless of water used. To a single commodity rate where you've got a metered water service with a single commodity, to seasonal rates, tiered rates, lot size rates, all the way up to what's referred to as a water-based budget, where you literally have a different water budget for every home or every parcel in the city. And so the committee looked at a lot of these different rate structures, tried to determine what made sense for Thousand Oaks, and ultimately came to their conclusion. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Tapking now, let him go through the committee's deliberations and what their recommendation is, and then I'll finalize it with a little bit of a staff analysis of that recommendation. So, Doug.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm, again, Douglas Tapking, and I'm here to represent the Thousand Oaks Water Rate Committee. As you are aware, the committee started meeting in January. We were selected by the City Council as water rate users in order to participate in this process. First, I'd like to thank both the City Council and the committee members for doing this. Secondly, to let you know that your staff worked tirelessly to educate the committee on all the issues. They researched all the plans, provided data. Anything that we asked for, they moved forward. Now, I know that you expect this to occur. But I think it's important for you and the public to understand that this was done without hesitation and providing all information so that we could do our due diligence in order to do this. Special thanks needs to go to Mark Watkins, Joanne Kelly, Louise Helliwell, and your consultants, Jeanette Hahn and Kim Baylor. They need to be thanked for their tireless work. We are the water rate customers that utilize this system. We were charged with the responsibility of reviewing and comparing water rate structures managed by the city and to come back with some information for you. We were not charged with actually determining the actual rate. That is for staff to do. Water is the lifeblood of the community. Without water, life is miserable, the grass shrivels and dies, the public space is no longer viable. Heat becomes oppressive, people leave, and your community dies. Property values will drop. In short, your community no longer exists. Rising costs and competing uses, such as lower density, larger properties, communities and correspondingly larger bills, versus higher density properties or smaller lots, and therefore relatively smaller bills. How then do we as a community and as a committee promote conservation and maintain the quality of life that we in Thousand Oaks have come to expect? Where is the fairness in this equation? This then is the conundrum that the committee faced. Over a 5-month period of time, we dealt with this on a regular basis. This committee worked hard in order for this to happen. Why is this important to you, and why are we here tonight? Simply put, the committee you appointed represents all of these areas. Members took their jobs seriously. They came prepared to listen, to learn, to debate, and to discuss these topics. We learned that no matter how extreme our conservation efforts are, the cost of water is going to continue to rise. This does not come as a surprise. After all, the delivery and usage of water is dependent upon so many factors that you cannot control. Consider the following. Did it rain enough this year? Is the snowpack deep enough? Are the Santana winds blowing for 2 days or for 2 weeks? Did it rain or flood? Are the delta smelt more important than people? Or are they simply bait fish? Lastly, what does it cost to deliver water to this community and ensure that it is clean, safe to drink, tastes good, and is an adequate supply? We were briefed, intensively so, on the delivery infrastructure, the financial forecasting plans, the capital programs, the neighborhood rate programs in every community around us, typically what the adopted rate structures were, what the pros and cons of each one of those were, whether they were successful or whether they had failed. The committee was originally structured to conclude after 5 public meetings. Needless to say, that did not work. Several members of this committee went so far as to prepare detailed independent research plans and brought them back to the committee for consideration. And they were evaluated carefully by both the committee and the staff. We looked at these things on a regular basis. Early on, it became obvious to the committee that there were several things that were important. First, we were not interested in seeing our public space, the parks, the schools, anything along this line going brown. Therefore, they could not be priced out of the market. Second, it became apparent that individual residential customers, you and I, are the major consumers of water, and irrigation is a huge part of that. Third, incentives are always to be preferred over penalties. Fourth, we looked continually at tiered structures versus commodity rate versus invasive versus you name it. Fifth, no one wants an excessive water bill. No one wants to see water running down the street. We spent most of our time on the thorny issue of residential water rates. We learned that household bills range anywhere from roughly $32 a month, $32 a billing period, to about $1,800 a billing period. No one wants an $1,800 water bill. No one wanted to waste water. We heard from many of our residents. Some of the comments were crass, prejudiced, and outright outrageous. However, the vast majority of the comments were from residents who appreciated the opportunity to participate and openly shared with us the extreme measures that they went to reduce their consumption of water. They explained how the water bill was affecting their lives, their property, and the community values which they so cherished. These people expressed their frustration with the existing rate structure and how they believe it unfairly penalizes them. They were being told to maintain their properties to a community standard while still trying to conserve water. No one, large or small property owner, wanted to bear the burden of someone else's consumption and enjoined the committee to find a fair and equitable rate structure for all consumers. The community continued to wrestle with this issue of a single rate or a tiered rate. We reviewed extremely invasive options, including residential head count, square footage, how many toilets do you have, how many trees, did your family size change this year, to simple structures of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tiers or commodity rates. Various iterations of this, their ramifications, consumed the committee's time. The question ultimately came down to, what is the most fair to all consumers? Please consider the following. What do you pay for a gallon of gasoline? Is it priced the same for 20 gallons as it is for 1? Or do you pay an increased rate if you consume more? If you have a gas guzzling car, aren't you paying more to consume more? And at some point, doesn't it become too expensive to operate? If so, won't you conserve and therefore spend less by driving a more efficient car or drive less? Do we penalize those people driving large SUVs by charging them more for gas, or do we encourage them to drive a higher mileage vehicle? This then became an issue. The bottom line is this: water is expensive. Residential customers are feeling the pain and taking conservation measures into their own hands. High-tiered rates further penalized customers and took away the funds that they could have used to do additional conservation programs. Ultimately, this type of an argument resonated with the committee members that you appointed. Therefore, the Water Street Committee recommends that the residential rates be changed from a tiered rate structure back to the straight-line commodity rate that was in 2009. Additionally, we recommend a modest conservation fee to encourage and promote conservation. On that point, we'd like to note that the city's water conservation efforts have been wildly successful. The committee wants to meet the community water-saving targets required by statute and to promote ongoing water savings through an incentive program. Although we had a great rainy season this year, you know and I know that the Santana winds are coming and the sun will be shining. The committee recommends that the rate structure for multifamily, residential, commercial, and irrigation customers also remain a commodity rate, as it has always been. This seems to be the fairest structure for all. Therefore, this committee presents this information to you for your consideration. Should you have questions, we are here to help. Thank you.
All right, questions for staff? Ms. Belinda Pena.
Thank you. I have many questions, but I will just begin with the very first one for Mr. Watkins. I needed clarification on something you stated. You mentioned a list of various rates, and you say that flat rates or other rates are no longer legal in California. I need to make sure that I understood you correctly. What exactly were you referring to?
There was, Joanne, you can help me. There was a law passed. There's certain Northern California communities primarily, but also Port Hueneme had a flat rate where there were no meters, and so you would pay the same amount, for example, $30, $40 a month, regardless of how much water you used. To promote conservation, the state is mandating that everybody install meters and go to at least a single commodity rate. And so Port Hueneme, for example, has done that. I think they were the only one locally. And then the cities of Sacramento and some of the other Northern California cities are in the process of doing that. That's not the single commodity we're talking about. That's a flat rate where you pay a single rate regardless of how much water is used. That's different than the single commodity rate that's being proposed here.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Now a question from Mr. Tapking. Mr. Tapking, you made a mention or a reference to residents who made crass statements. Are you referring to residents that were attending these public or open meetings of the committee? Are you talking about the committee members themselves?
No, the committee worked tirelessly and very well together. We had some very interesting debates, but some of our residents came in. We heard from some of the best and some of the worst. People were obviously very emotional, but some of the statements were off the chart. They were the minority of the statements, but the committee clearly took note of those. But let me emphasize very clearly that the majority of people came in and shared stories that I think if you had heard the stories that to the extent of what people were doing to conserve water, they touched your hearts. It was very interesting to hear this.
And since you are representing the committee, I must assume that you made comparisons to the other water purveyors, CalAm and CalWater, thank you. And there are large lots are being serviced by those two as well. And did you compare the rates or potential water bills for those?
We did. We looked at a lot of these. I mean, and that's what we were charged with.
And I've got a couple of additional PowerPoint slides if you want to see. I've got some of those comparisons if you're interested in seeing those.
If you do? Okay,
Yes.
yeah, I'd like to. Thank you.
If I could, after Mr. Tapkin was done, I was going to wrap up with just a few slides to summarize what the committee recommendation is and kind of what our analysis is. If it's all right with council and the mayor, I'll run through. I got like just another 4 or 5 just to summarize. Is that all right?
Sure, we can do that.
I'll do that quickly, just to kind of briefly, so it's clear what the recommendation on the table is. So, the committee's recommendation back to council was to go back to a single commodity rate and to change our base charge. So, the way our current rates are structured, we have a base charge. That's the amount that you pay per month, whether or not you use any water, and then you pay the commodity charge, which is currently tiered, and then you pay a lift charge. And so the committee looked and said we should go to a single commodity rate. The base charge should be reset so that it recovers 1/2 of our fixed operating costs and our Cayugas fixed charge. So we pay about $1 million per year in a base charge to Cayugas. We pay that $1 million whether we take any water from them or not, similar to the base charge we charge our customers. The committee then also recommended that all the non-single family, so commercial, industrial, multifamily, irrigation accounts, stay the same as they are. That the lift charge remain a separate component, stay the same as it is. And then they suggested that we had these 2 new components, which is a water shortage condition component. And that was, in essence, saying that if the city council declared a level 1 water shortage, that the rates would be increased by some amount in order to promote conservation, and also a conservation component. So very quickly, I went through the base charge, what that is already. Lift charge would stay the same. During a water shortage, the rates would automatically be adjusted. We'd have to determine what that amount would be. On the conservation component, we've been following up with the city attorney. Prop 26 that passed last November includes some very specific language in regards to fees for service, and so that this may fall under that, where we'd be charging a fee on the rate and in exchange for the program. So we need to do some more research to determine whether or not that can be passed through or included or not. And that would be something we'd have to come back to council in September. So very quickly, the rates we have now are as shown on the screen. It's a tiered rate, $3, $3.70, and $4.63. The base rate, $15.53 a month. The proposal is to increase that base rate to $18.54. That would then cover, as we said, the Cayugas fixed fee and 1/2 of all of our fixed costs, and then go to a single commodity rate. The other thing I have to point out is that these numbers are all backward-looking. They're numbers that are used for comparison purposes only, so we can compare apples and apples. So we're looking backwards at our existing rates, not at what's going to be in the new water financial plan, because that will consider both the operating budget that just passed, the capital budget, water rate increases that we know we're going to experience this January 1st. And so these numbers, just as the warning we're putting out, that we use to make sure we can do an apples and apples comparison. And the result is this table here, which shows what our existing rate structure is, how that would change with the proposed single commodity rate, what the dollar value change would be, and what the percent would be. And so you can see for a low water user using about 10 HCF a month, their bill would go up about 8% and about $3.62. Average user is the 17. For our average user, we'd see about a 4% increase, $2.67. And then a high water user, if you chose, say, 30 or 40, would see about a 5 or 10% increase. The reason that the increase on the lower users is smaller is there's a lot more people within that customer class. So a lot of customers are using little water, and so a very slight increase on them has a bigger impact on others within that range. So kind of jumping ahead real quick to how some other folks are structured, here's how currently California American and California Water Service are structured. So California American is very similar to ours. We're 0 to 15, 15 to 35, and then anything 35 and over. California Waters broaden theirs out a little bit, 0 to 13, 14 to 43, and anything 44 and over. They're priced, I would call them a little less aggressively. So the jumps between their tiers are running about 10 to 15%. The jumps between our tiers are running 20, 22%, somewhere in that range. Looking at Las Virgenes, they've got more tiers, and their tiers are much, much broader. You see their highest is at 100 plus. Oak Park Water, very similar. They've got a very low tier 1. So they're all kind of in that same general range as far as how they've set their tiers up, in the roughly 0 to 15, 15 to 25, 30, and then that amount and greater. So, Councilmember Bill De La Pena, I hope that answers your question as far as how some of the others are.
Yes, it does, but it would have been nice to see the rates for Thousand Oaks on there once again toward the end. Well, I can look it up on the staff
sure. Or I
report.
can go back to the page with our rates if you like.
to have a direct comparison, a side-by-side comparison.
And again, what we're looking at really here tonight is the rate structure, not the rate. Because the rates we bring back, we'll take the structure that the City Council approves tonight, we will take that rate structure, then we will go and finish the financial plan, because we know, because we have to make the revenues and expenditures meet. So we will then project out how much water usage we think we're going to sell, look at the existing operating budget, the capital budget, and the anticipated increases from Cayugas. And then so we know what our expenses are, we plug those into the rate structure that we're given, and then we can give you the actual numbers. They will not be the numbers here, because we know that there's other increases that we have to take into account. So this kind of gives you comparison, but really what we're looking at is a structure and how, whether they've got tiers, how many tiers, how aggressively they're priced, and that type of thing.
Okay, I know that Cal Water, I believe, is going to raise the rates again in the new year, is my understanding. I'm a customer. Okay. But Cal Water, that is, not Cal American. I'm not with the City of Thousand Oaks. I believe it's going up, 20% again. It has been going up on a regular basis for the last 3 years. The other question I have, and I know my colleagues probably have a lot of questions as well, is to find out from you, obviously this is what is being proposed tonight is changing the amount that we have in our water fund. And as you mentioned and touched upon, we're going to have to review all the rates and make sure that we're making up for any loss that may be incurred as a result of the recommendation here before us tonight. But can you tell us approximately how much of a hit the water fund might take, if at all?
It will not take a hit. And any of the water rate structures that the City Council chooses to use, we will then price that structure so that it is revenue neutral. So we will determine the amount, based on how much water we think we need to buy, all our fixed costs. We'll determine what our operating expenses are, and then we will establish the water rates so that the revenues and expenditures meet. So it will be revenue neutral to the city. We're not going to either make or lose money on any of these structures. We will try to price them so that they match.
I think that's very important to know. Thank you. That's it for now.
Other questions? Ms. Irwin.
Thank you, Mr. Tapking, for your presentation, and to everybody on the Water Rate Committee. I know this is a very complicated issue, and I know you spent a tremendous amount of time on it. I guess my questions first. Well, one question for Mr. Tapking. What was I know the committee recommendation is the commodity pricing. What was the vote on that? You have 12 committee members, and how many were in favor of that?
The evening of the vote was 7-3-1. We had 7 people in favor, 3 voted against it, 1 abstained.
And the 3 were in favor of tiered or just against?
They simply didn't want to. They didn't believe that the commodity rate. If I can express this right, they didn't believe that the commodity rate promoted conservation enough.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that, Mr. Watkins. I see a whole list of cities that have tiered rates now. Are there any cities in the county that have commodity pricing? Are there any Cayugas and the other 2 water providers that have commodity pricing?
Well, yeah, Cayugas is our wholesaler, and we do pay a tiered rate to Cayugas. It's basically 2 tiers. This past year, our water use was so low that we were a Tier 1 customer, so we didn't get into Tier 2. Typical years in the past we have, but only for a small amount of our water. Maybe the final 5 or 10% of our water would be Tier 2. All of the major wholesalers within Ventura County, all of the cities within Ventura County do have a tiered rate structure of some sort, as well as all of the major private purveyors. So California American, Cal Water, Golden State Water, which are kind of the big 3 on the private side, all have a tiered rate structure. It could be, we're not aware of anybody that has the single commodity rate for single-family residential, but it could be there could be a small water provider up in the Ojai Valley somewhere that does. But all of the major water providers have a tiered rate structure of some sort.
Okay, and you're saying as far as the tiers that we began with, that they were priced pretty aggressively because of the drought?
Well, when you price your tiers, and I can go back. There's a slide here that kind of shows how you set your tiers. Sorry, I'm going to kind of advance back through again. I've been going back and forth. That's the wrong way. When you price your tiers, you have to price them enough that they send. Here's my little slide. You want to price them enough that they send a price signal. So if you price the tiers very flat, then it becomes very similar to a commodity rate. But this example shows just a 3-tiered system, and it's kind of your old calculus where you're changing the angle of your graph based upon how you have your tiers set up. So tier 1 is going to be flatter than a single commodity rate. Tier 2 is going to be probably a little bit more so, and then you're playing catch up a bit with tier 3. You can model that line on the tiers with either multiple tiers or with different pricing so that it either diverges more or less from that single commodity rate. So this is probably close to how ours was structured. So clearly if you're just a tier 1 customer only, you're going to be paying less than with that single commodity. There's going to be a breakover. For ours, the breakover is probably in the 21 or 22 HCF range. And if you're using more than that, you're paying more with the tiered rate. But you can mimic this same graph and price it less aggressively. You're not sending as strong of a price signal for conservation, but it is still a tiered rate.
And I know that tiered rates are called conservation pricing. Is there data that backs that up? Is when communities, because obviously many communities have gone to tiers in the last couple of years, is there data that backs up that encourages conservation?
Just anecdotally, in the local area, of all the different water rates that were out there, the most aggressive pricing was Golden State Water, which is a private purveyor, does a large portion of Simi Valley, and they also had the largest amount of conservation. So as we looked at all, there was varying conservation and varying rates, but they were, with the strongest tiered pricing, they also had the most amount of conservation. So.
I know Mr. Free has done an incredible amount of research, and we received an email from him, and I was wondering if you could comment on, I assume you have Mr. Free's email about...
yeah, it was in the supplemental packet, right.
And he had some issues with the report. Could you comment on his 2 comments in the email that he sent us?
Those 2 being, one, in regards to lot size adjustments for surrounding agencies.
Yes.
And so, the only lot size adjustment we're aware of was Las Virgenes had kind of a penalty system in place, which they have since gotten rid of. But the surrounding agencies have a very similar structure. Those are the ones I just went through. They're basically a tiered rate structure without a lot-based component. And so that's not accurate. They're generally going with a tiered rate. The tiers change in size and the structure changes, but the lot size adjustment is not common, at least in this area. A little more common maybe out in the desert and some of those areas where water is even a greater commodity than it is here. You'll see some of those lot-sized systems out there, but not here much. And then what was the second item I was trying to recall?
Lot size was the second issue.
Oh, okay.
And the first was that the formula, first recommendation of the committee is to increase the base rate.
Oh, I'm sorry, in regards to the base rate.
Yeah.
I guess everything with water rates is a zero-sum game. And so, you're going to if you raise rates a little bit for somebody, you're lowering somebody else, and conversely, if you lower them for somebody. The way it works with base rates, if you look at the base rate, as a water utility, we take a lot of risk on an annual basis because a large portion of our fixed costs are included with our variable rate. And so if we sell a whole lot less water and we've anticipated selling more, then you have a hard time covering your fixed costs on an annual basis. That requires you within your water fund to have a bit of a reserve. So some years you would draw from that reserve and other years you would add to it, just depending on how much water you sell. If you establish your base rate somewhat higher, then you reduce that variability a bit. And so you have a more of a stable revenue stream because you're getting that base rate. The base rate or higher base rate is an advantage for the higher lot under a tiered system is an advantage for the large lot owners because everybody, and so all 16,000 of our customers are paying that higher base rate. So you've got a lot of revenue coming in. And so if you lower that base rate, then you're obviously putting more of the cost on the variable rate. So as the base rate goes low, it acts to the advantage of smaller lots or smaller water users. and to the disadvantage to the larger lots because more of the cost is on that variable rate. And so in this case, what the committee's recommendation is to raise the base rate somewhat, and then that reduces some of the variability to the water fund, but it also then kind of advantages the larger lots. And so the comment here is that, for an average user, only a portion of it would be on the variable rate, which is true, but you still are disadvantaging to an extent the smaller lots and advantaging the larger ones. I know it's a long answer. Did that answer your question, though?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
On the chart, page 20, there is where it says monthly consumption 0, and then the difference between single commodity and existing rates, and where it says that the increase in bills would be 19%. So is that from 0 to 10 HCF that the increase would be in their bills would be 19%?
Well, it's going to vary. So that 19% is the difference between the existing base rate and the proposed base rate. So if you use 0 water, then all you're paying is the base rate. And then as you go up to 10, you will go down to 8%. And so in between all those, it'll vary from 19 to 8.
Okay, so it is directly.
Right.
There's nobody using 0. Okay.
Right.
All right. Thank you.
Other questions? Dr. Clancy.
Mr. Watkins, earlier you mentioned your slide 3 that in 2007 the Water Financial Plan recommended a city consider tiered rate structure. Was that in response to the what was perceived to be an impending water shortage and water problems with the Delta and also the aqueduct?
I think it was really in response to the overall trend of the water industry to recognize that water at all times needs to be used wisely and needs to be treated as a limited commodity. A lot of infrastructure has been built in California to move water east and west and north and south, and yet it's at its breaking point. And so regardless of snowpack, regardless of rain, the trend has been permanent water conservation measures. And so the City Council a couple of years ago adopted permanent water conservation measures, and that's been really the trend within the industry, is to promote conservation, with conservation pricing being one of those methods.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
I guess my question is for Mr. Watkins. The whole premise behind the tiered system is conservation. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay. Are there other ways for us to monitor how much well, let me ask this question. Is there a goal or is there a threshold that each city is being asked to meet by the state as it relates to conservation?
Yeah, the current threshold we have is the one that's called 20 by 2020, which is a plan we brought to the council, was that a month or so ago. And that was a plan passed by the state where we had to submit to the state and say, how are we going to reduce our water use 20% by the year 2020? At this point, we've met that goal already. I don't know if we'll sustain those savings because we had a fairly wet winter and a fairly mild summer last year. But that's the current goal that we've got.
But it's a year-to-year deal, isn't it? I mean, by 2020 you have to reduce, or when you say we've met that goal already, what does that mean?
Well, that is the current, say, regulatory kind of framework that we have to work within. Any given year, Metropolitan Water District can, based upon their needs or their shortages, ask us to reduce or require us to reduce with penalties or other types of things. That was so last year, for example, we were under mandatory conservation by Metropolitan, and we were under the 20 by 2020 by the state. So,
and we're not under the mandatory
correct
anymore. All right.
Right.
Is there a way to measure the city's conservation efforts on a year-to-year basis?
Yes.
All right. And is there a way that, well, let me just ask this. Could we go through this process, not necessarily with the committee group, but could we go through a similar process, maybe with a study session, because it's just a widespread issue, prior to adopting our budget every year, and where we set the formula, if you will, is based on the conditions of water in the state of California and the conditions that are presented to the city?
Yes, we've typically been doing it after the operating budget and capital budget are adopted, because the numbers from those then get built into our financial plans once we know what our right.
If we were to adopt the committee's recommendation for the next, it wouldn't be the fiscal year because we'd put it in January, so it would actually be for half the fiscal year. I know you guys have to do stuff in terms of budgeting in the water fund and everything, but would we be in terms of conservation? Have you looked at projected water usage with a commodity rate for a year?
No, we haven't.
Is there a way to do that? Based on, I know when I look at my water bill, they can tell me how much water I used back in 1906.
We've got, what happens on an annual basis is that water usage is highly dependent on weather also. And so it's really hard to predict, what the impacts would be, both from going to a single commodity rate and knowing what the weather is going to be like over the next year. That's part of what we have to do, is we look at our historical sales and try to make reasonable estimates as to how much water we're going to sell, because that has a big impact on the water rates, is how much you're going to sell.
All right. Mark, let me ask I'm asking a number of questions, but here's the point. Is there a way that staff could bring back to the council a mechanism? Because what I'm sensing from the council is we are really interested in conservation. I also recognize that nobody wants people paying, forget $1,800 a month water bills. Nobody wants people paying $800 and $900 a month water bills, $700 every 2 months water bills per cycle. And nobody wants brown grass, all the stuff that Mr. Tapking outlined. At the same time, we want to do a good job of conservation. So my question is there a way to adopt the committee's report? And for the record, the vote was 7-3. I heard, that it was a much closer vote. In my view, that's 2-1 margin. So it seems to me there was a good majority of folks that after 9 meetings said this is the way to go. And at the same time, measure our conservation efforts. If we need to adjust it, you bring it back and we make adjustments.
Certainly. If council adopts the single commodity rate, we will come back in September with what that rate would be. And then we go through that whole Prop 218 process. That rate would then take effect in January. And then we get a monthly update on how much water we've sold, and we compare it, so we can monitor our conservation as we go forward based on that, and determine whether the commodity, whether water use is going up or down. Depending on the weather, that water use going up or down could be due to the commodity rate, or just partially due to that rate, and also due to the weather. And so, but we would be monitoring that, and if we thought that the water use is starting to go back up, we could certainly report back to council and look at redoing another rate structure.
So would it be fair to say, Mark, that the value of a tiered system, at least in part, is for some level of certainty, and so you're really not doing this process all the time? The tiered system is kind of a built-in, excuse the pun, automatic pilot conservation tool.
Right. It's not easy to adjust water rates because of 218. It ends up being a very long process because we've got to go through the noticing law. So we can't react quickly as far as adjusting the water rates.
But it's not something we would have to react quickly to, is it? Because you can see the trends, you have a sense of where we need to be at some given point in time. So it's not something that you're going to come to us every 2 weeks and say, whoa, we're way over where we need to be.
Right, and it's something we try not to do often. We try to have stability in rates, and for years we were very successful at that. The last few years have been really extraordinary as far as the rates we've seen. So we try to keep the rates very stable, so they're not changing a lot, and you're not, because one of the things that could happen if we went to a commodity rate and back to tiers is then you're seeing a lot of volatility in the rates over years, and we try to kind of temper that.
Is there a mechanism by which we can build into a threshold where we stay at a commodity rate, but if we reach a certain threshold, then we implement a less aggressive tiered system?
And kind of have that predetermined up front?
Yes.
That might be possible. We haven't looked at anything like that. It certainly might be possible.
Is that something the committee would, if we were to, and I don't want people coming out of their seats, but if there isn't council support for just the straight commodity rate, is that something that you would recommend we give back to the committee or just deal with staff?
The problem with going back through the committee at this point is that we know we've got a rate increase coming on January 1st. It's going to be about 8 or 9%. If we go back to the committee and then come back to council, rather than being able to implement a new rate in January, it'll be February, March, or April, and during that time period, we're losing money, and so the rates have to go up a little bit more to kind of make up for the past losses.
Right.
So that's the problem with going back to the committee. What I would suggest, it sounds like similar. I mean, one of the things that we could do is come back to City Council in September and say, okay, here's a single commodity rate. Here's how it'd be priced out, and we could also come back with a couple of tiered structures that are less aggressively priced or more moderately priced, however you might want to put that, because looking at that, the graph here, you've got the single commodity rate, which is a straight line. You could model a tiered rate so it's closer to that straight line. Also, we could come back with a couple of priced out scenarios like that, and then City Council can choose that one. Then we go through the whole protest ballot piece from that. Something along those lines might work.
All right. We have some speaker cards. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. Robert Peck, followed by Nick Kidwai, followed by the last name is Sarvaiya.
Hi.
Okay.
Good
evening, sir.
I've been a resident of Caneo Oaks for 25 years next month, and about 2 years ago I had emergency heart surgery, which forced me into retirement, and thanks to the Ventura County Fire Department, I'm still here. But that's put us on a fixed budget, which is of great concern. We've got about a third of our property right now. We've got 3/4 of an acre, and it's nothing but dirt. We've segmented that off. We don't do anything with it. And we're very concerned because the house is obviously a large asset, and it's integral in our retirement plans. And we don't want to see that one devalued, nor do we want to see the neighborhood devalued because it turns brown. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Nick Kidwai, followed by Karit Sarvaiya. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mayor Fox, City Council, Nick Kidwai, resident of Newberry Park. Glasses don't look good. Coming here as a stepchild from Newberry Park, a Cal-Am customer. Very disappointed that the city is not using its bullhorn and whip to use some influence while we are being gouged. I applied for the committee. I was foolish enough. I thought that there may be some representation. I went to 2 of the meetings by Cal-Am, and I have to admit, they are the most nicest brown-nosing type of people. I'm sure they are watching. They act like they are members of concerned citizens. But the thing, that I don't like I said before, they have their hand in my pocket, in my wallet. It's ridiculous. We live in a pretty wealthy country. This is not Beverly Hills or Brentwood, like I said before, but this is Thousand Oaks. You should not really have to worry about watering your lawn or how much water you use. That does not mean you waste. I think most of the council members have been to my home. I live in a modest home, in a tract home, but I'm lucky enough to have live on a cul-de-sac. And I figured out that every time I hand water my trees and use my rain sprinklers manually, it costs me between $7, $8, or maybe $10. That's just ridiculous. In this country, you can go to McDonald's and get a fairly nice meal. Right now you can get 50 nuggets for $10. Food is so cheap, and it takes a lot of water to grow. The recommendations, I like it, except that there should be some measure to reward conservation. I don't know what the council will do, but I would appreciate, you represent us at Cal-Am too. I remember 5 years ago when the last Public Works Director was that he had, I don't know, a personal vendetta or something like that. The city went after Calam when it was bought by the French people, stuff like that, and the city was spending a lot of money talking about lawsuits, etc., that an alien power had taken over our water. But I don't see any movement on the council to protect thousands of Calam people who are being gouged. Nothing will change. I mean, are you going to send a letter to Calam telling them that this is what you're doing at the city level? And there's a wonderful gentleman here, he's probably going to be speaking, but I was shocked that the cost of the water is 27 cents. 27 cents is what is the cost.
Thank you, Mr. Kibble.
Ridiculous.
Kirit Savaria, followed by Robert Hodson.
My name is Kirit Sarvaya. I was a member of this Water Rate Structure Committee, Citizens Committee. I was one of the 3 people who voted against it. So the reason I sort of joined the committee was because one day I got a bill, it was over $300, and I thought, oh, this is actually, a significant amount of money. And I changed my habits. I reduced my water usage and tried really hard to get down to Tier 1. It's pretty hard, but with my 5,000 square foot lot. Anyway, but the point is that I think the tiered rate structure really changed my habits, and I think it's a really good way to encourage conservation, and I think we should keep it there. When I was in the committee, at one point we explored a 4-tier structure with great, with great amount of interest. And what that was roughly, I think Mark can probably explain a little better, but it was roughly taking the current Tier 1 and splitting it into half, roughly, and then the Tier 2 and Tier 3. And there were different numbers than the existing ones. But essentially, it sort of rewarded the people who were using the least amount of water by making it easier for them to afford that water. And the people who use the most amount of water, which is going absolutely against the state's requirement to hit the 20% conservation by 2020. So it sort of, the 4-tier structure would actually help get us closer to this 20% reduction by 2020 and increase conservation. So we really should reward the people who use the least amount of water and just encourage the people who use the most amount of water. And I think this is something that you really should think about, sort of not rejecting. I sort of thought about as to how did this committee, which is going along the right path in my mind, sort of suddenly changed its path towards the end, towards the second last meeting. And I want so if you recall one of the slides that Mark had put in, there were two people in the committee from small land, small tier, small rate customers. Medium were two were large, and then there were people from commercial, multi-dwelling, parks and schools, right? But if you think of that, about 90% of the water is actually used by residential usage, right? And so the multi-family dwelling, all of that is much less of an importance. That the real bulk of the water is being used by families, and so the discussion sort of centered around that whole thing about the family tiered rate structure. And while the voting happened, you got to remember, while there were people who were representing the families, there were also people who were representing multifamily, parks, schools, all of those, and they happen to be living in large lots, and so they influence the vote towards what's better for large lot customers. So I think you can kind of understand why it was sort of 2-1, as you said, 7-3.
Okay. Thanks very much. Robert Hodson, followed by Jim Gemmerling.
Hi, Robert Hodson, the 35-year resident of Thousand Oaks, Mayor, City Council. We urge you to accept the proposed rate structure. It's revenue neutral, and it's equitable to all the user classes. That big tall spike there on that on the tier, the incremental dollar or the incremental gallon of water is really expensive. And thirdly, at $3+ a unit, it's a conscious encouragement to conserve.
I don't know about the other people around here, but every time I turn on a water faucet, even if it's in the house or in the yard, I consider how much water is being used. And it's kind of like gasoline. When the price of gasoline goes up, you conserve. You drive a little more conservatively, you drive fewer miles, you don't do a trip. So, and same thing like food. You know, as food goes up, most of us reduce our consumption of food to stay within a budget, so you reduce your water consumption to stay within the budget. So I urge you to accept the proposed rate structure.
Thank you, sir. Jim Gemmerling, followed by Elizabeth Zernick. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor Fox. Thank you, other council members. I attended, beginning September of last year, the meeting where we had the stands were full, or the seats were full. There was a couple of things that we heard resonating during that. Was something needed to be done. It needed to be done sooner rather than later. There was also discussion by the council that some of the rates hadn't been modeled out through the due diligence process, maybe as they should have been, and the true determination of the success or lack thereof of moving from a commodity rate to the new tier structure would be determined when people opened up their first bill or their second bill, which I think is, if I was a businessman, well, I am a businessman, but if I tried to introduce something like that, I'd be out of business. So I do thank the council members and the mayor, because at the end of that meeting, someone said, I believe it was you, Mayor Fox, we need to do something sooner rather than later. These people need relief. As you've heard, many of the folks who live in these neighborhoods have lived there for many, many years. They're on fixed incomes, and the relief does need to come sooner rather than later. I think I'm a little bit surprised as I'm sitting here tonight also, and I'm hearing some of these people coming back. I was at several of those committee meetings listening. I believe that there actually was a discussion, if I remember correctly, if we hit a critical, at level 1, I believe is the right terminology, water shortage, could we go to a tier structure? And if I recall correctly, the discussion around there was the only people, or the people who would be impacted most greatly would be those, again, with the larger lots. And they didn't feel that it would be as effective if the entire commodity rate was able to be bumped in those level 1 periods, where everyone would feel it and everyone would result in conservation. I know myself, I know many of my neighbors have ripped out yards, put in drought tolerant, redone irrigation, and that for me was done prior to the new tier structure. I'm phrasing things a little differently, because the commodity rate, I first moved here in 1970, the commodity rate was the rate that was in place for many, many years. I think the tier rate is the new rate. It's been tested. I think we found some bugs. I think we need to seriously take the committee's recommendation under consideration. I think an incredible amount of time on their part went into the discussion. Some of the discussion I've heard council members raise here tonight, I heard at many of those meetings. So please, these folks have spent a lot of time. They took it very seriously. They put their vote on the table. If you folks voted and it was 3-2, the motion still carries forward. 7-3.
All right, thank you, sir. Elizabeth Zernick is our last card. Good evening.
Good evening. Hi, my name is Elizabeth Zernick. I'm from Newbury Park, and I was on the Water Rate Restructuring Committee with Doug. And like he said, I've really appreciated all the information that the staff had prepared for us. I wanted to point out, in regards to your question on the event, in the event that there's a water shortage, we did actually recommend recommendation number 4. If you look in our report, which he had just mentioned, that a price increase to the single commodity rate should be added upon a water shortage condition level 1 or higher as declared by the council. And we recommended that so you wouldn't have to go back through the process of revoting and processing, as Mark had said, on the being able to raise the rates and basically react to needing to meet conservation targets. So that was all I just wanted to point out.
All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
We have some written statement cards, 7 in favor, 1 did not indicate. So that's it. All right, go back to staff. Any follow-up comments?
Just to kind of reiterate, the committee did recommend that in the level 1 declaration, the single commodity rate would go up. Prop 218 does not allow us to charge more than it costs us to provide the service. And so when we come back, we will be setting the rate at our cost of providing service. If we just add an inflator of some sort on there for level 1, we're not sure how that will comply with Prop 218. Maybe you could use that to pay for a water conservation program or a rebate program or something. We're just not sure at this point. So that would be the only comment.
And that's exactly why I'm thinking that you guys need to look at this so it complies with 218 and everything else. So, all right, other questions? Ms. Villa-de-Pena.
Thank you. The committee also recommended a charge to fund a conservation program. So, not to exceed 0.5%. Would that be in any conflict with what you just mentioned?
Yes, and that's the one that I mentioned earlier that the city attorneys looked into and has continued to do some research, because Prop 26, which was passed by the voters just last November, affects the ability of cities to pass charges for services, and this would presumably be a water conservation program, a rebate program. And so that law was passed last November, just recently took effect, and so we're still, it's kind of getting sorted out throughout the state what those impacts are. And so we may or may not be able to do that. The 0.5% that was recommended by the committee is only about $75,000, so it wouldn't go a long way towards any kind of a conservation program anyway. But we're not sure whether or not we can do that. We're still.
I'm assuming the committee knew that there were legal challenges.
A lot of this came down really at the last meeting, and my recollection, and Doug, feel free to correct me, but my recollection is that at the final meeting, when the single commodity rate was affirmed, there was also concern that it wouldn't promote conservation enough, and so in order to kind of balance that, the recommendation was to have an enhanced water conservation program. The committee was saying they really wanted to see rebates and things, not additional staff to be doing things, but rebates for high efficiency clothes washers or more efficient sprinklers. And then in the event of a level 1, they wanted to be able to increase rates. And part of that was as a reaction to some of the information our consultant gave us. And so that information was, a tiered rate system that has more aggressive pricing is going to have, send a stronger conservation message. The analogy that was made, and the analogy Mr. Tapking made, was to gasoline prices. For a single commodity structure to have a similar cost message, you have to have a pretty high commodity price. And so that has happened at times with gasoline. When it gets up at $4 and $5, even though it's a single commodity rate, it's priced high enough that it really impacts you. Water still is arguably fairly cheap at $3 for 748 gallons. So whether or not that single commodity price really sends a strong enough price signal, we're not sure. But that was the intention of the committee, was to say during a level 1 declaration that price would increase. That would then send the cost message or the price message.
Well, indeed, it does sound like more research needs to be done. I think after 9 or 10 meetings that we wouldn't have these open-ended questions or these vague answers and suggestions that more research would need to be done, because this committee put so many hours and so much effort and research into this. I'm actually surprised that we might need to look further into this. I'd much rather just make a recommendation tonight. But if, say, for example, the council were to approve the flat rate, and we were to do the additional research regarding conservation and the shortage condition level 1, Proposition 218, and so forth, is there a chance that we would have to change the whole thing altogether, depending on the outcome of the research that staff will be doing?
No, the two items that we need to do research on, which is the small conservation component. It's a very, very small component of this whole thing. And the second is whether or not we can add on additional pricing during the level 1 drought. We can figure both of those out before we come back to council with the final financial report in September. And so the major decision tonight for City Council is what the water rate structure is going to be. Is it going to be a single commodity rate, a tiered rate, or something else? These other items are fairly minor, and we'll work with the City Attorney's Office to figure those out. Even if those other items didn't go at all, it wouldn't be substantial.
I think please remember that when we looked at all of this information, we considered what was going on in the other areas and whether or not tiered structures made sense or didn't make sense. Clearly, the committee said incentives are important. Penalties are not the way to deal with it on a regular basis. We want to incentivize our people to conserve. Clearly, that's happened. We've met the 2020 already. They've worked hard in order to do this. Clearly, the message is being sent that if you use more, you're going to pay more. It may not be $4, $5, $6 a gallon as gas may be, but clearly if you are consuming more, you are paying more at this particular point.
Well, yeah, that's understood. Thank you.
Other questions? Ms. Irwin.
Yeah, when we initially had asked, I think the mayor had asked for the water rate structure committee to be put together. I think what we were really concerned about is the hundreds of people in Conejo Oaks that told us they were conserving, and their rates kept going up and up. So I guess in those highest tiers, even if you conserve, you still stay in the highest tier. So what I was wondering is the suggestion that Mr. Servia mentioned, that there would be an additional tier, I think at the very top, to at least reward conservation for the very highest water users. Is that what the idea was?
There was actually a 5-tiered structure that came back to the committee, and that included two things. It included another tier at the top, so that it would kind of flatten that curve that we were showing you previously. And it also included a smaller tier, breaking tier 1 in half. So you had a 0 to 7 and a 7 to 15. The concept with the smaller tier was the concern for, say, a retired individual living in a condominium that used very little water. And the idea was, if we're going to raise the base rate a bit, which goes somewhat against the smaller user, if we could put in a small tier and basically sell that water at just a pass-through cost, just sell it for what it costs us to buy that water. And so that way you would be supporting the very small user and then adding the tier 5 in an effort to try to give some relief to the large user. The problem with that is when we priced it out, so kind of the way it worked with our committee is that we'd come up with concepts, and then we would have to go back and figure out how would these get priced based upon looking at all of the water we sell. When we priced that out, everybody gets that 0 to 7. And so since everybody gets that 0 to 7 and we sell so much more water at the bottom and we sell very little up at the higher amounts, then you had to price the higher tiers that much higher to make up for all the water you're selling down there at the 0 to 7. And the high water bills, if you remember, are only for generally 2 billing cycles. So they're generally going to be, say, June, July, August, September. You're going to have the high bills, but you're getting the break on those water costs year round. So that was kind of the drawback and kind of the learning experience maybe with that 5 tier, is that you can do the 5 tier. You probably can't price it the way that we were trying to price it at that time.
And our customers are the city customers are able to average their rate over the year to cut down their summer rate costs.
We do have what's called the level pay plan now. And that was also a reaction. That was one of the things when this group came last year and City Council said, look, we need to do something for immediate relief. And the level pay plan was put into effect. And that does, similar to the way Southern California Edison and others do it, you can pay a flat rate per month. And so if somebody wants to sign up for that, we can look back, average their bills over the month. So rather than paying, because some of the people that came and testified at the committee were using, say, 80 units of water in the summer and only 4 units of water in the winter. And so if people want to do a level pay plan, they can do that. So it averages their bill. Then once a year, there's kind of a catch-up time period.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Dr. Glancy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Watkins, my perception is that Southern California is pretty much a semi-arid part of the world. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Yes.
How's our rainfall been over the last 20 years?
Up and down. Did we include a slide? Let me, we threw a bunch of slides in at the end here. Not sure what questions would get asked. Let me see. Okay, so we've got a couple of slides here. One is Thousand Oaks annual rainfall. And so obviously shows how kind of somewhat sporadic the rainfall is. This goes from 1970 to 2010. So this is covering a 40-year period. The average within there ends up being Yeah, about 16 is what ends up being our average. You see the highest rainfall years peaked out just over 40. That was the El Nino year when we had some issues with our wastewater system. But in general, what you do see though is any period of high rainfall was pretty quickly followed by a period of low rainfall. So it definitely is up and down, averaging at about 16. Let me show you two more. One is our wholesale water purchases. And so you can see this line has been trending up. But again, this is going from 1970, and clearly with the growth of the city, you would expect that line to trend up. You look at that dip at the end, that's the roughly 30% reduction we've seen in the last year or two. And if you take that line back on a horizontal, you have to go back to about 97, 98. We're using about the same amount of water, or we used about the same amount of water this past year as we used in about 97, 98. And then the final one is Sacramento Valley, looking at their runoff index. This is, of course, is where our water is coming from, and so not the same volatility. Northern California is not quite as volatile as Southern California in rainfall, but some of the dry years, certainly going back to late 1980s, early 1990s, you see those multiple years of very, very little rainfall. So obviously trending up and down, you're either in a drought or heading into one.
Yeah, that's been my experience for the 30-some years I've lived here. I think in operating with that, with the uncertainty of the water supply that comes down, is also the water that comes from up north. Judge Wanger's decision, favoring the smelt and the peripheral canal or the delta area, how much water is going to come down the aqueduct. It's all pretty uncertain. And Wanger's decision, as I recall, reduced the amount of water coming through the aqueduct by 66%. And that's pretty substantial, and that got us into a situation where the Met ended up with their dictum to reduce consumption by 15% or suffer $2 million penalties, I recall. It was about $2 million, wasn't it?
That would have been $2 million on the city of Thousand Oaks, right?
Right.
Metropolitan's penalties are much, much higher in aggregate, but ours, if we hadn't reduced, would have been about $2 million.
Let me ask you this. Had we incurred that penalty, how would it have been discharged? Who would have paid it?
It would have had to come out of the water fund.
Out of the water fund. So that's out of the people that actually...
rates are either increased to cover it, or if you've got sufficient reserves, those reserves are drawn down. In our case, our reserves have been down in the $500,000 or $600,000 range, so that we did not have the ability to absorb a penalty like that.
Okay. What I'm struck by is that we got a tremendous dilemma here. We have, as someone mentioned, become accustomed to a way of life that's a little greener than what God meant us to be. This is not a naturally green part of the world, but we've kind of gotten used to it. I've flown over the area, just as one of the previous speakers mentioned, and you see a lot of brown. And it's not becoming brown, it is brown. That's what this part of the world is. So we've got a natural problem with water supply, and it's never going to end. It's just never going to end. And we've also got a situation where people were paying outlandish amounts of water, dollars for their water. So it seems like what would be a great approach would be to adopt a system that really promoted conservation, and not just a token $250 to promote conservation, and yet at the same time took some of the gouge out of the people that live on large lots. I mean, we can't ignore those people, but I think by the same token we can't ignore what we have in terms of water supply and what the seriousness of the problem is. So thank you for your answers. I appreciate it.
Mr. Watkins, just a couple other questions. I know I've heard it anecdotally and I've read it in reports, but just so we kind of are working out of a kind of a fact base, the vast majority of water that's used in a residential home is for landscaping. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Like, what's the percentage?
Well, it certainly varies throughout the year. On an annual basis, do you remember the number?
For a typical single-family residential, it's about 70% use outdoors, 30% indoors.
So, while low-flow toilets and all the devices that we've talked about in terms of inside the house, and even some of the irrigation things, and I'll get to that in a second, the vast majority of water that is used is used for landscaping purposes.
Yeah, and we see dramatic difference in the water we serve.
And I know you know the answer to this, but it was the city of Thousand Oaks many, many years ago that in a sense, through our general plan, we on purpose planned for half-acre lots.
Right.
Yeah, and we've done that over and over again. Since I've been on the council for 20 years, it seems like we don't do it anymore, but when we were dealing with large planned developments, there was always a interest in greater or less density, greater size lots. The city drove that policy, not the homeowner. We do have some relatively smaller lots, but throughout the city, we've insisted on, through our general plan, large lots. Not necessarily half acre, but large lots. So that combined with the reality of the landscaping, my question is I think the city needs to come up with a formula that recognizes those facts. I just think it's unrealistic to expect somebody, even though we've had testimony here, to tear out $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 worth of landscaping, mature landscaping that's been part of their home for a couple of decades, and put in drought-resistant plants because their water bill is $1,000 or $800. Until we're at a point where we're getting penalized by the state, we need to do something different. I don't know if it's less aggressive tiers or whatever, but these water bills that are unsustainable, albeit they may be for 100, 200, 300 folks, I just don't think as a city that is a viable option. Now, the committee report was a commodity rate. My question earlier was, can we adopt the committee report and be in a place where we can measure how we're doing on conservation, in the area of conservation, and then make an adjustment the following year if by data we can show we're not meeting where we need to be?
Yes. I mean, there's that process we have to go through, but clearly if we see water consumption going up dramatically, we could certainly come back to council and say, we need to do something.
Is there an explanation for, do we have other large lots in the city that are not City of Thousand Oaks water? Is there an explanation for why those folks are not complaining?
You mean within the private water purveyors?
Yes.
I'm not sure why, but we have talked to both the private water purveyors in town to find out, are they hearing from their large lot owners? And in general, the answer is no. I mean, they'll get a call or two, but certainly not a lot. And I can't explain why that would be. Their rates and their tiers are similar to ours.
And they have more large lots, don't they?
Certainly on the Cal Water side, I would think they've got more large lots, yeah.
Right.
And they've got North Ranch on the Cal Am side, Dos Vientos and some of those large lots.
This building opinion maybe can give some insight into that. I'm thinking Dos Vientos, even though it's not part of the city, but Lynn Ranch. Those are Lynn Mere is part of the city, but my question is, how come we're not hearing from those folks?
I don't have an acre lot, but it's pretty large, and there are several neighbors that have acre lots, and all I can say is that we have accepted the fact that water is a precious commodity, and we are just tightening our belts and conserving water as much as we can. We have protested to the PUC and whatnot, but the fact is that water is only becoming more expensive. It's not becoming cheaper, and we are taking steps to conserve. That is the answer from my neighborhood, basically, and others who I know have large lots with Cal Water. I cannot speak to those with Cal Am.
Yeah, my fundamental problem with our current system is that, by definition, if you have a large lot, you're almost automatically in Tier 3. So, that's I see that as problematic. You can conserve all day long and do all these, really extensive, extraordinary issues, and you're still in Tier 3. Although I think you raise a good point, you're only going to be there for a couple of months out of the cycle.
I've got a slide up now that kind of shows that percentage of Tier 3 customers if you wanted to see that. But right, in the wintertime, for the 2 billing cycles, you're running around 400 customers, 2 to 3%. And then when you peak in your July, August, September, October, you're running 2,500 customers. The overall average, you get about 8% of our customers ever get into Tier 3. So that's in round numbers.
And those are the folks that are paying the.
Well, Tier 3 could be, as low as a bill that's in the 140 or something like that. It doesn't have to, and then anything up from there.
Okay. All right. We have no more speaker cards. It's not a public hearing. So what's the pleasure of the council? We have a committee report recommending adoption of the committee's recommendation to go back to the commodity rate. Ms. Irwin.
I agree with everything you said. I think there is, I personally, when I see every city in the county and most counties in the state at the tiered rate, I think that I would be very hard pressed to go to a commodity rate, for me to recommend going to a commodity rate. But I think that when we started this whole process, we priced the tiers too aggressively, and there must be some way to price them less aggressively. And that's what I would like to move, is that you report back to us with some way to still do the tier system. It's the data unequivocally shows that tiers promote conservation, and we're not sure if we put the $76,000 toward conservation, whether we're really going to see any big difference. I think it would be pretty complicated and pretty dangerous for our water fund balance to be saying let's go along at a commodity rate and then switch to tiers if we start to run into issues. But I think that there's a way to price these tiers less aggressively. And I also am not sure if we're doing enough for these residents with water audits. Maybe there's some way that the city could give loans to help people switch out irrigation, to help them move more toward, saving water in some way, so they don't have these really high rates. But my motion would be, or is, that we have staff come back with tiered rates, just as every other city in the county has, and all our water providers have, and something that is less aggressively priced, and maybe come back with some sort of program where we can help the people, the highest water users in Conejo, do a water audit, find out is there some substantial way that they can save water on their irrigation.
All right, Ms. Irwin moves for a report back from staff. Do you have a time frame on that?
I think we're all set because we have to. I think staff has the time frame because we have to determine water rates, right?
Right. We would come back at the first or second meeting in September.
Okay, very good. With a restructured tier system that is less aggressive.
Less aggressive, so we can really take into
directly
account
addresses the issue of large lot owners.
Right, but I personally cannot move away from tiers when all the evidence shows that's the. You used a very good word. I think it's you're sort of and of course I forgot what it was there, but it's more self-regulating that way. You're not going to get out of control if you have a tier system. So.
All right, Ms. Irwin moves. Discussion on the motion. Dr. Clancy.
Thank you. From my earlier comments, most people understand that I have two real interests. One of them is conservation, and the other is taking the gouge out of those that are really paying high rates. I think that Ms. Irwin's motion can go towards both of those issues. Mr. Watkins mentioned that the tiers could be structured so that the graph sort of paralleled the commodity graph. So I think that we can get something that's much more reasonable. I think we have to. So I'll support the motion.
Ms. Builded opinion?
I will only be able to support the motion if indeed that we do not dismiss the committee and work with the committee. And I know you've had 9 or 10 meetings, but I believe that this is unfinished work, and perhaps we need to, I'd like to have the committee's input on this rather than just have it go to staff. This is something that we need to work out with you as well, because you've put a lot of time and effort into this. And if we are to actually come up with a different solution, and I hope it will be a solution that will be palatable for everybody, it has to be with your input.
The committee has done an incredible amount of work already. We have their reports, but I think in the short time frame, we really need staff they really have the knowledge and the background, and I don't think that we need the committee for the next couple of months. And then I think they all need to be invited to, get the staff, whatever the recommendation is, make sure the committee members have it. But these people have already put in an incredible amount of work, and I would prefer to inform them right before, but this needs to be done by staff who has they're the professionals here, and we have a very limited time frame. So I wouldn't be putting that as part of the motion.
Then I will not be able to support it. Thank you.
I can see we're headed to, we're going to have to find some common ground here. I have a very difficult time not adopting the committee report. I really do. They met, I recognize the tiered system is designed for conservation, but we're hearing from staff we're meeting our goals. Obviously, that's not going to fly. The committees, we're not going to be able to get the committee's report through. Council meets every 2 weeks. If we were to get a report from staff, the committee's already been constructed, they meet. If we were to get and this is a question for you, Mr. Tapking, as chair of committee, and once the staff report was completed, provide that to the committee for their input, kind of advise and consent type process. Not that they need to go through, but they'd have a work document, a finished report. If they want to make a recommendation as a separate report, they agree with portions of the report, all of it, none of it, that type of, do you think that's doable?
I think if you put it in that form, the committee would probably come back and do their work. Okay?
All right. Is that, if I were to make an amendment, Ms. Bill's opinion, it would pass, would that at least meet you halfway for getting the committee's input?
Well, I mean, right now that is not included in the main motion.
Yeah, I'm going to amend it.
And could you please restate that?
Okay, my amendment, let me just put an amendment, is that in addition to Ms. Irwin's motion, that the staff report be provided to the committee with sufficient time, 2 weeks is what it is, between council meetings, sufficient time for the committee to meet, review the report, and provide by letter their evaluation of the staff report, and whether they concur with it, part of it, but at least we get the committee's recommendation on whatever staff brings back.
We would have to hear from the committee. I know Mr. Tapking is speaking on behalf of the committee, but I'm not sure whether the committee has charged him with making unilateral decisions on behalf of the entire committee.
Well, let me just put it this way. If they don't want to meet, then they don't want to meet.
Right.
Okay, I, like you, have an interest in getting their feedback. My sense is they're very motivated to make sure we get this right. The council, at least as I'm counting votes here, is not going to adopt their report. So I'm trying to find some common ground here to keep the committee involved and get to the essence of what they've asked us to do. I just want to point out what Dr. Clancy said. There may be a tiered system that can be very closely aligned with what may be essentially a commodity rate. And so I think that's certainly where I'm going to end up. If we can't have a commodity rate, then we need a much less aggressive tier system. That's my view. But we got to make a decision tonight.
I know. I'm looking for body language here to see if people will be in agreement, and it looks like people would be in agreement with that. And so, yes, I would be able to support your amendment.
Friendly
then.
amendment.
I have no problem with that. I didn't want this committee to have to go through
I understand.
additional analysis, but to look at the report after staff does it, I mean, there's no problem with that at all.
Friendly amendment that the report would be provided to the committee. They will convene, they will meet, and they will provide a report back to the council based on the staff's report. All right. So that's accepted.
Yeah,
so
it would be a committee. It would be, we have a council meeting, and between the two council meetings, there's a committee meeting where they can go.
Yes, when the staff report is completed, prior to being presented to the council, the committee will have an opportunity to sit down, have a agendized meeting, and actually review the report and make a recommendation of their own based on the staff report.
I think that's a good suggestion.
All right. Okay, so that's a friendly amendment that you've accepted. So on the motion, any further discussion? You have a final comment, Mr. Irwin?
No more comments.
Okay. Vote, please.
Motion carries 4-0.
That is approved. On behalf of the council, while I recognize that a lot of work went into this, we're making sausage here, folks. So it's a tough process. We're doing our best. So that'll come back to staff, and then staff will get back to the committee. And thanks again to all of you for a really, really good job. You did a great job. We're going to work through this. It'll be an improvement. One more thing, Mr. Watkins. Either way, we're going to be ready to implement whatever changes we do by January.
Yeah, well, currently it would end up being somewhere around January 14th or 15th, just because of all the process had to fall into place. So as long as we still hit our September dates, we're still on track.
Fair enough. All right. Yeah, Mr. Mitnick.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and especially those of you in the audience from the Caneo Oaks area, this is a good time to reflect and remember one thing. Years ago, when the city was working on behalf of the CalAm ratepayers back in 2001, 2, and 3, we had a protest, and we were up in San Francisco for a number of weeks protesting in front of the California Utilities Commission, the California Public Utilities Commission, CPUC, on behalf of the CalAm customers. And we were successful. Rare times that cities are successful. We got a rate reduction, and rates were frozen. We also succeeded in negotiating with CalAm to get Caneo Oaks out of CalAm territory, and you were in CalAm territory for many years. And the result of that is you did get increased water pressure, a more reliable system, because the actual source came from the city. And also your rates are lower than they would be if you were in CalAm. And CalAm has the tiered system. So that's just a point of information. There was a long history, a long fight to get the Caneo Oaks into the city system.
All right, very good. All right, that concludes with our committee reports, council issues. We have none. City manager report.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, no follow-up from comments are made during the meeting. On the state budget, we have shared with council, and there have been newspaper stories written about the League of California Cities and the California Redevelopment Agencies Association. They have filed a lawsuit with the California State Supreme Court to protect local government revenue. So we're in a fight for our lives to keep $6 million a year, or $6 million this year, then $1.4 million each year thereafter of local redevelopment property tax dollars in the community. And another lawsuit is in the works to reverse the state's attempt to take VLF monies from the community, which is a net hit to us of about $200,000. We're still waiting and watching what may happen to some library revenues from the state. We may lose another $45,000 there. The council will go into a summer recess for the month of August. The next council meeting will be on September 13th. And at this point in time, we are looking at 3 potential public hearings, one dealing with the redevelopment issue, the redevelopment agency urgency and regular ordinance to keep the redevelopment agency alive, and then the annual community development block grant annual performance and evaluation report. These are the federal funds that come in. We have to do an annual report on how the monies are spent. That'll take place, and we are also looking at a public hearing for the Oakview zone change request, increased in density request for a potential development in the Los Feliz downtown area. That is it by way of follow-up. Thank you. Andy.
Madam Clerk, do you have another copy of the adjournment? Just give me a second. All right, can we just do it when we come back? All right, that brings us to adjournment. Tonight we're adjourning in memory of Natalie Wartick Wald. Ms. Wald was the mother of retired city employee Gary Wartick, and we do not have the adjournment. Normally we cover that, but since we're going on recess, I did not want to delay it. Ms. Ward lives in the Conejo Valley, and her son worked for the city of Thousand Oaks for a number of years as our economic development director. And so our thoughts and prayers are with the Wartick and Wald family. With that, we're going to adjourn to our regular meeting after our summer recess to September 13th, 2011. Anybody needing to contact council or city manager's office, city is open for business. And while we're not having council meetings, the council members will be available to the community as you need us. With that, we're adjourned to September 13th. Have a good week.